Okay, it is 6:30, so I will call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, October 10th, 2022, and we are here in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak? Here. Ms. Garrison? Yes. Dr. Lakuta? Here. Mr. LeBrun?
Present.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Ms. Wright?
Present.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, board does have a quorum, and Ms. Wright is on the phone tonight, so we will be doing everything by a roll call vote. All right, we have proof of notice that this meeting has been duly noticed, so we are good there. Ms. Heitz does have those pieces of information. I will show that. And then before we ask for a motion for approval of the agenda, we do have a full meeting agenda tonight. We do have 2 action items that are coming from policy. Of note is the 2023-2024 calendar. And then we are welcoming staff here tonight because we will have our 4K through grade 6 annual goal presentation. So we're looking forward to that. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Moving on to A, the consent calendar. We do have our normal items on the consent calendar. You do have the staff resignations and assignments that were in your packet. We do have 2 field trip requests, and then we do have the following donations. Brian Vetrovec for $500 for Aaron Fritz's class. A coronet valued at $200 from Phil Cox for the band program. We have $3,000 donation from the Optimist Club of Oregon, Brooklyn for the Splash Pad Medallion. And then we have approximately 500 books from Melissa Ross and the Fitchburg UPS store for books for FES students. We have a $4,400 donation from the Oregon PTO for a donation to Netherwood Knoll, a $4,100 donation to Prairie View from the Oregon PTO, and a $2,700 donation to RCI from the Oregon PTO. So we really want to extend our sincere gratitude to those individuals and entities that made those donations to our school district. So thank you very much. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I can second.
All right. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Moving on to B, information items. First up is public comment. District Policy 180.05 provides an opportunity for the public to address the board. We value the public comment period and feedback from our stakeholders. To comply with open meetings law and to ensure consistency, public comment will have the following parameters. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their comments, and Ms. Katie Heitz will signal the speaker when their time is up. The board will not comment after each speaker and will reserve discussion to any items on the agenda, and speakers are welcome to stay for the meeting to hear comment on there if that's part of the agenda. And then next steps following public comment may include referral to the appropriate administrator for follow-up with the speaker or placement of the matter on a future board agenda. So we do have 4 people registered for public comment tonight, starting with Rachel Inman. If you want to come up to the microphone, and then just state your name and your address so people understand that you are a resident of the Oregon School District.
Okay. Yep. My name is Rachel Inman. My address is 2134 Vintage Drive in Fitchburg. I come before you tonight to speak on the referendum. I am a certified public accountant, and in my previous job, I worked at the Legislative Audit Bureau for 12 years as a financial auditor. As part of that role, I followed the state biennial budget process closely, watching the Legislative Joint Finance Committee meetings as they deliberated on the budget. I watched as the 2011-13 state budget cut total aids to schools by $792 million, or 7.4%, while simultaneously limiting school districts' ability to raise revenue through tax levies. The reason given for the aid cut was to help close a budget shortfall. I have watched subsequent budgets have minimal aid increases or have the governor's proposed aid increases be reduced by the Joint Finance Committee, and in the most recent budget, holding the per pupil adjustment flat for the 2-year budget. This all being done while the State Budget Stabilization Fund, or better known as the Rainy Day Fund, has a balance of $1.73 billion. This balance has been funded with subsequent budget surpluses. The legislature has the ability to provide additional school funding to districts from this budget stabilization fund, but have chosen not to. The impetus of the Legislative Joint Finance Committee for reducing the governor's requested general aid increase and having a flat per pupil adjustment in the most current budget was that the state was receiving coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security funding, or CARES funding, from the federal government related to the COVID pandemic. And while this is true, the district did receive additional one-time funding. This funding was meant to support the unexpected and increased costs associated with COVID, not ongoing expenses like cost of living pay adjustments. Half-day classes meant additional transportation costs. Virtual learning created a need for additional tablets and Chromebooks, and additional cleaning measures were implemented across the district. The state funding levels have proven difficult for districts across the state for many years because it has trailed the pace of inflation, even when inflation was low. Now, in a high inflationary period, the challenges are becoming greater. Sure, the district could hold salaries flat to help with budgetary concerns, but like myself and probably many of you, I am sure teachers are feeling the price increases too. The last thing I want is our talented teachers feeling undervalued or making difficult decisions to teach elsewhere for a pay increase. That is why I will be voting yes for this referendum. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Next up is Rob Palmer. And Kim, you taking the place of Rob?
I am obviously
okay.
not Rob Palmer, but
All right.
His flight was delayed and he emailed me his notes from the airplane. So Rob Palmer, 633 Prairie Grass Road in Oregon. On March 8th, 2021, OSD Board President Krista Flanagan said, "This school district has never tried to hide anything." That wasn't true when she said it, and it isn't true today. The Oregon School District has engaged in an orchestrated effort to hide the real financial impact of the Oregon School District 2022 operational referendum from district residents. A few weeks ago, the district spent about $8,000 to send a flyer to nearly 12,000 residents explaining the referendum. If you read the flyer, it clearly states the revenues from year one are $5,420,000. Year two are $3 million. And year three are $2,980,000 for a, and I quote, total over 3 years, $11,400,000. Not difficult at all to understand, because if you total up those three amounts, you get $11,400,000. But if you actually read the language from the ballot question, it is an entirely different story. The ballot states, authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in Section 121.91 Wisconsin statutes by $5,420,000 for the 2022-2023 school year, by an additional $3 million for a total of $8,420,000 for the 2023-2024 school year, and by an additional $2,980,000 for a total of $11,400,000 for the 2024-2025 school year and thereafter. Those are two very different things. The district's flyer states the amount decreases each year for a total over 3 years of $11,400,000, while the ballot uses the words additional and total to explain that these increases are cumulative. In fact, $11,400,000 is only the subtotal amount for year three, not the total for all 3 years. The total for all 3 years is $25,240,000. But wait, there's more. Not only does the school district's flyer mislead the taxpayers by not explaining that the tax increase is cumulative, it fails to explain that the tax increase is permanent. Note the words "and thereafter." This tax hike is permanent. 12 days ago, I emailed Andy Wieland and Leslie Bergstrom, as well as copied all of you and requested a clarification. 12 days, no response. Either this underscores the total lack of professionalism on the part of the district staff and board, or the district did not respond in order to cover up their malfeasance. Come to think of it, it could definitely be both. Gina Jonan denied that the flyers were campaign materials and described them as informational. How can these flyers be informational if they are factually incorrect? do not include the actual language from the ballot question, and fail to inform taxpayers that the tax.
Kim, that's 3 minutes. Thank you. Next up is Sherry Pollack.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Pollack. I live at 815 Liliana Terrace, and I am here to express my support for the November 8th referendum. First of all, I come here not only as a parent of an Oregon high school student, but also a native of Oregon, grew up in the Oregon school districts. I'm very, very proud of our school district. And also as a retired person who has a part-time job to supplement her retirement income. Despite all this, I am in complete support of the referendum. The Village of Oregon, Brooklyn, and our surrounding areas have been experiencing increased home values, tremendous values. And why is that? Because of the Oregon School District. People move here from all over the country, all over the state, because of the excellence at the Oregon School District. They like our special education program. They like our robust music and art education programs. We have popular and effective trades programs and apprenticeships. We have mental health supports, rigorous and varied academic options at all grades, healthy buildings, equitable services, and athletic opportunities available for all regardless of ability to pay. None of these great things would be possible without the talented and committed OSD staff. And by staff, I mean everybody, from the person that drives the bus and cleans the floors and makes the lunches, all the way through to our superintendent and our school board and our lawyers and our accountants and everyone that makes the district work. Due to OSD's reputation among peers, staff is highly sought after by our neighboring districts. Neighboring districts have been luring our staff with better pay and benefits, sometimes offering up to $10,000 or more to go work for them. So far, OSD has been able to hold its own because, according to teachers, OSD is a great place to work. A place that's good for teachers to work is a great place for students to learn. However, the ability of the district to maintain this culture is at risk due to the financial cliff created by the legislature, as described by Ms. Inman earlier. The legislature's refusal to prioritize school funding over the last decade has left this cliff for not only Oregon to try not to fall over, but all the rest of the school districts in the state. As a result, 8 of the 16 school districts in Dane County are going to referendum in November, and at least 40 other Wisconsin school districts are going for recurring referendums. Without a successful referendum here, one can only imagine the talent of the OSD that OSD will lose and where the cuts will lie. This is not something I want to see happen. The referendum is an investment in our schools. It will allow OSD to remain competitive and to not only retain staff, but hire the best and the brightest. It will ensure that students have the support they need to receive a full, robust education and will adequately fund programs and rising costs. It will empower Oregon's future generations. Any tax increase is a sacrifice, but this one is truly needed. I'd like to thank the board for recognizing this before we fell over the cliff.
Thank you. All right, next up is Josh King.
Good evening, everyone. Josh King, 150 Juana Circle in Oregon. It's very interesting that I think maybe two groups or more have the same goal in mind: to pay teachers more and to get them the value at which they're worth. I think I've said this before. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, my brother was a teacher until recently. And they were consistently undervalued for what they do. That was back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s when they were teaching basic curriculum. So much administrative work is put on teachers today that I think whatever raise you get them is probably still not going to be enough, frankly. But we're at odds right now because, we're at this really unique time where federally we're under the highest rates of inflation that we've seen since probably the 60s or 70s. There's nothing we can do about that locally except absorb it. And that's absorbed by the price of food, the the price of daycare, the price of everything you do. Statewide, I'm sure there's tax increases coming as well. Locally, we have a convergence of this referendum. We have a potential 10% tax levy from the village. We have a bolus of tax incentives right now that are going to overwhelm, maybe not everybody in this town, it's going to overwhelm the poor, maybe not the recently retired. But if you've been retired for a while and you own a home outright and you're on a fixed income, I imagine the AARP would really like to have a say so and do some calculations. And that's where I really want to go with this is I think the calculations are what maybe a lot of people are very interested in because it looks like it terminates at year 3, but it goes on and on and on and on. If luckily the value of our homes continue to go up, this tax goes up. Now, I don't know why we're going for such a bolus except to say that you teachers probably haven't had a raise in a number of years. That's not your fault. That's prior administration's fault. There should be an ongoing cost of living raise that makes this thing equitable for everyone. They know what's coming. This is a surprise. We're not in a good picture. Again, I can probably absorb this. I don't necessarily want to, but if I'm out in the town and I use my few dollars I have at the end of the year to go visit my family out of state, or I buy Christmas presents, those are seriously going to be in jeopardy now. People over the next 3 to 10 years are going to have a really tough time making ends meet with this. And I think that's part of the village's problem. I think it's part of the way that we finance raises here. I think it's part of the state and federally for sure. We're in a really tough spot right now. And to ask for all this at once is going to put a lot of people in a really tough position. Maybe me too.
Thank you, Mr. King.
I'd
Your
ask
time
the
is up.
last thing. I'd encourage everyone to do the full calculations, and I'd ask the board
Your
and the
time is up,
finances
Mr.
to do
King.
the full calculation over 10 years to see how much it's going to cost you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else here for public comment?
Yes, I would like to speak.
Your wife has already spoke on your behalf and read your message, so.
Well, she didn't get
Okay.
a chance to finish it. So
Okay, go ahead.
thank you. How about you? Thank you. I'm Rob Palmer, 633 Prairie Grass Road, Oregon, Wisconsin, 53575. I want to thank my wife for speaking for me. I was unavoidably detained, and I know that's not easy for her. But what she said is important, so I want to finish the statement. 12 days ago, I emailed Andy Weiland and Leslie Bergstrom and copied all of you requesting a clarification. 12 days and no response. Either this underscores the total lack of professionalism on the part of this school district, or the district did not respond in order to cover up their malfeasance. Come to think of it, it could be both. Gina Jonan denied that the flyers were campaign materials and described them as informational. How can these flyers be informational if they are factually incorrect, do not include the actual language from the ballot, and fail to inform taxpayers that the tax hikes are permanent? After all, this school district employs both an attorney and a communications specialist and retained an outside firm to help design the flyers. The former board president said, "So the same trust and respect the district residents have with us in taxing and spending should still be there when we deal with them and their children." There is no reason why any resident of the Oregon School District should trust this board or these administrators. Not with our taxes, and certainly not with our children. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, is there anyone else here for public comment this evening? If you want to go ahead and step up to the microphone, say your name and your address, please.
Hi, Kelsey Umland, 857 Alpine Parkway, Oregon. I didn't prepare anything for tonight, so it's kind of last minute, but thank you for having me. I grew up here in Oregon. My mom was a elementary school teacher for over 30 years and retired from Prairie View Elementary. My sister and I both graduated from Oregon High School. Both went on for, both got engineering degrees from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I really attribute our success to all the hardworking educators we have and great programs we have here in Oregon. And I want to encourage everyone to support this referendum so we don't lose that. My husband and I recently moved back here within the last year. We were looking at all the Madison area schools. I work on the west side of Madison for exact sciences. We needed to get closer to the west side, so we evaluated, Verona, Middleton, McFarland, but Oregon really was our choice. We did a lot of research on outcomes of students and, as many statistics as we can find about where to move, and we chose Oregon. We feel that this is the best place for our kids, best community, best programs, and our teachers deserve everything they can. They deserve more, and I feel that if we don't pass this referendum, we're going to lose our teachers, lose our programs. It's really important for our kids to get what they can get, and we've had an amazing track record, and people are not going to move here if we don't invest in our schools. So I vote, please pass this referendum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes public comment for this evening. So moving on to B2, OEA report. Is there anyone here from the OEA that would like to make a statement? Okay, please come to the podium.
Hi, I'm Angela Sager, Vice President, OEA. The Oregon Education Association Board of Directors, as the duly elected representatives of the teachers of the Oregon School District, endorses the Oregon School District's operational referendum on the ballot this November. As the OEA, the district, and the community all strive to continue to provide a high-quality educational experience for our learners, recruiting and retaining high-quality educators in every classroom is paramount. The state legislature's 2-year freeze on school funding in the current state biennial budget, despite the availability of existing revenues, is a brazen attack on public schools in Wisconsin. The state continues to fall further behind in its statutory responsibility to properly fund public schools. With the state legislature determined to gradually defund public education, the only option left to the Oregon School District is to act locally. At the same time, on a state and national level, we face an unprecedented shortfall in the number of people willing to choose and stay in education as a profession. While there are many factors contributing to this crisis, public education's continued inability to compensate educators comparably to other professions with similar educational attainment is one large contributing factor. At this point, we face a profound challenge not only of recruiting and retaining educators in our district over others, but recruiting and retaining quality candidates to education over other professions. Like so many other districts in the state, Oregon has recognized that the only way to address the state's dereliction of their duty to properly fund public schools is through a local operational referendum. We want to remain a destination district that attracts the highest quality educators, as we know providing high quality educators in every classroom remains the backbone to providing the highest quality learning experience for students. The future of public education in our district is at risk. To this end, the OEA endorses this November's operational referendum and urges all voters in our community to get out and vote in order to provide the necessary funding to continue to provide quality educational experiences for all our learners. We stand for the power of public education to strengthen our community's future. Please show your support for public education by voting yes on Tuesday, November 8th. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to B, information item 3, student report. I am happy to report that we will have students next meeting. So part of the Superintendent's Council, we've had, what did you say, a lot of interest in being with us at board meetings, so that's exciting. So we'll have students next time. All right, moving on to C, action items. First action item is Policy 931, electronic surveillance of public areas. Both 1 and 2 are coming from policy, so I will start with our policy chair, Heather.
Thank you. I'm actually just going to turn it over to Ms. Jonan, who's going to give us an update on the last 2 policy committee meetings and our recommendations.
Thank you. So the policy committee tonight is recommending the change that you see in the packet in policy 931. And this is a change to how long we keep our electronic surveillance records. So last school year, we had a security audit that was performed, and as the policy currently stands, we keep our security footage for 14 days. And one of the recommendations that came from the audit was that that be increased to 30 days. And we have found in a handful of cases that having footage for 30 days would have been very helpful, because sometimes there can be a delay in reporting or in law enforcement requesting records because maybe a complaint, came to them a little bit later. And so given that this would have been helpful in the past, as well as a recommendation from our security audit, the policy did approve that change, and the policy committee is seeking the board's approval for that tonight.
Okay, I will, since it's coming from the policy committee, I'll turn it back over to Heather that you can make a recommendation in the form of a motion, and it does not need a second.
Great. I'd like to make the motion to approve policy 931 as described by Ms. Jonan and in the
Okay.
packet.
I will offer the floor for any questions or comments. Go ahead, Anna.
Just one question. I guess curious to know if there's a cost associated with the extended length of time that we're holding these. Do we have to have additional hard drive space? Is this just another CD on a shelf? I'm not sure how that works.
No, we actually have enough capability in our current system to be able to handle this without any problem. Just have to go into the system and change a number.
Fantastic. Thank you. No further questions.
All right, any other questions? Okay, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on to action item 2, 2023-2024 calendar. Heather.
I'm going to turn this right over to Ms. Jonan again to walk us through the calendar.
You will see a calendar labeled Draft 2, 2023-2024 in the board packet. That calendar was approved by the policy committee at the meeting just prior to the board meeting tonight. The policy committee is recommending approval of that calendar. It would be, can she hear me? Okay. So it would be wonderful if the board can approve that tonight. If not, the board can certainly table that until the next meeting in October. Our goal is to bring a recommendation to the board, ideally in October, if not the first meeting in November, because it is the time of year that families do start calling, asking about the next year calendar, because what I'm told is particularly in the medical profession that people have to submit their 2023 annual vacation requests early. And so we do, for the benefit of our families, try to have the calendar done as soon as we can, but the goal is always to have the right calendar for our community. So in that line, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the calendar is developed. I think this is my 11th calendar that I have done with the school district. And it's a more complicated process than you might imagine because everything really goes together. There are a number of competing interests that we have with our calendar. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of in our district, and this predates me, is that we seek a lot of feedback from our stakeholders on our calendar. It usually starts with a survey to all of our families and our staff for input on the calendar, as well as discussions with the OEA on the calendar, the administrative team, and then we had a discussion at the policy meeting on September 26th, and then had additional conversations, and the OEA was present at that policy meeting as well. So looking at all of that feedback, and you will see it outlined in the purple, that this year we had 1,234 people respond to our survey, which I believe is the largest number since I've been here. So that was fantastic to see that level of input. If you look at the survey results, and I usually if I separate out for staff only and look at families only, that the results are very similar. And so I tried to highlight in the purple where they may be a little different. But looking at our community calendar, in terms of the survey results, that it has been a strong tradition in our community that people want to have off the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So you will see that reflected in the calendar, as well as when looking at this year, one of the big topics of discussion was, do we start school on Friday, September 1st, or start on September 5th? And so in looking to that, there was a pretty even split that people were interested in starting September 1st if that meant we could have an additional 2-day break in the calendar. And there were strong feelings about starting on Friday and having a 1-day school week as well. So trying to balance that in this calendar, we were able to accomplish both. So you will see in the recommendation that the recommendation is that school start after Labor Day on September 5th, but we would still be able to have a 2-day break for students in October and then another 2-day break for students in February. So we were able to accomplish both and end school June 7th. I'd also like to highlight that something that we've done for a few years now is that we do build in 3 inclement weather days in our calendar. So if we have all 3 days, then school would end June 7th. If we didn't, then school would end earlier. And we tend to make that announcement to our families in April when we are confident that inclement weather is behind us for the year. In terms of the one area that we were not able to accomplish because we do want to have enough instructional days for our students is there was interest in having January 2nd as a non-school day. And that is something that in light of trying to balance everything, you won't see reflected in this calendar. But we did have significant discussion in policy committee about that. So 2 things to also point out on the calendar. One is that this is a little bit of change for us from a staff standpoint, is that the semester will end on January 19th, which is after the PD day in January. And we did have discussions with the OEA about that. The reason for that is if we had ended the semester on January 12th, the semesters would have been very uneven. In terms of 85 days one semester, 92 days another semester. And in talking with the teachers on the calendar committee, they felt that would be very difficult for the students to have that difference number of days in the semester, as well as for teachers to try to have the same content-rich class with that difference of days. And so we did talk about, and I did talk to Mr. Pliner about this at length, that we know should the board adopt that calendar, that in January 2024 that we'll have to have discussions with our 7-12 and particularly 9-12 teachers to make sure that teachers have the time that they need to switch over the semesters and do the grading for that. And so we do have ideas about how we can accomplish that and want to continue discussions with our teachers for that as well. Additionally, this year we did survey our families about Ready, Set, Go conferences. That is a significant investment of time and resources for the district as well as for our staff, and wanted to see if that is something that our families felt was of value to them. And if you see the survey results, it indicates that it was a tremendous value to our families that participated in that process, as well as from a staff view. And that was something that was done K-8. And so when you see that people have no preference, it also may be that they had high school students and didn't participate in that process. And so in looking at the overwhelming results of Ready, Set, Go conferences, that is something that we do plan to continue as a district. We also do hear the feedback from the families that they wanted those dates announced earlier. And so we will be working with the administrative team as well as our teachers so that we can get that schedule out much, much earlier to families so that they can plan for those dates. And so Dr. Bergstrom will have a communication to talk about that when we share the final calendar with our families when the board approves it. Otherwise, I believe I've summarized the results. I just really want to thank everyone who responded for the survey and everyone's time. It is something that we spend a lot of time on because we know that it impacts everyone in our district. So with that, I would turn it back over to Ms. Garrison.
All right, go ahead, Heather.
Great. I just wanted to say a couple things here. Spoiler alert, I'm going to make a motion to approve the 23-24 calendar. But before I do that, I just want to give a huge thanks to Gina. It is an incredible amount of work. Calendar seems like it should be simple, but it is not simple. And I give such credit to the Oregon School District for reaching out to families, getting their feedback, getting feedback from staff. It took us 2 meetings to talk about it because there was feedback that we were considering, both in the form of survey comments that the committee read, as well as just hearing from the OEA. And so I think it's just a really excellent example of the listening, the responsiveness, the care, the extra effort that staff put in, and it's just a great example of how this district operates. So just a big shout out to you for that. And I thank you, Leap Year, because it's helping us accommodate many of those requests. So I guess that there's a positive there. So having said that, I will put forth a motion to approve the 23-24 calendar as presented by Ms. Jonan.
All right, so that's a recommendation from the policy committee. So that is now a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion or comments? Go ahead, Mary.
I just wanted to echo Heather's sentiment that it's a thankless job because you will never please 100% of the people, but with as much outreach that happens, with as much effort that goes in, and as many discussions that happen between the OEA and yourself and the policy committee, it's a kudos to you for putting our best efforts forward to get as much as possible. That will make as many people as possible happy.
All right, any additional comments? Leslie, anything from you?
Just thank you to everybody who put in all the hard work on the calendar.
All right. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. So we do have a 2023-2024 calendar. Oh, Gina, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to thank Nate Johnson for his leadership on the OEA. He has been on the calendar committee now with me probably for too many years. And so it is nice to have his experience and his lens, as well as Laura Stoller and Colleen Schell for our numerous discussions. So it definitely is a team effort.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to D, discussion items. First item on the agenda is committee reports. So anything additional from policy, Heather? All right, you're good. Thank you for the items tonight. B, vision steering. Troy.
We have not met, and Tim and Anna, I will reach out to you to look at dates for a November meeting, probably after November 8th. So.
Okay. Moving on to discussion item 2, operational referendum update. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you, everybody. So I will be going over in the next 15 minutes, because I have this down pretty much as far as timing goes, the presentation we're doing at our community sessions, because I know how challenging it is for people to attend the sessions, but I would like every person in the school district to have the information that they need in order to make a decision on November 8th. And I think this particular presentation really helps to give people the foundational knowledge that will be important to them as they move forward in their decision making. So here we go. We know that the board took action on August 22nd to ensure that there would be a referendum question on the November 8th ballot. You will see it when you are voting, when you flip your ballot over. The ballot's on the back side, or the question is on the back side of the ballot. We start every presentation, and I really do mean every presentation, with our mission and our values. Why we exist as an institution, and what we as a community value, and how that institution carries its mission forward. So you can see here we have an excerpt from our mission statement that was developed in 1989 and is just as relevant then as it is today. And then also our 5 values. And we already spoke tonight about the calendar and the amount of community input that is a part of creating the calendar every year. And I want to be able to remind people that our values were a part of a community input creation process also. There were well over 100 people who spent 3 days in the RCI cafeteria talking about what was important to them as a community member within the Oregon School District. And the values that drive our decisions on a day in, day out basis are depicted in that graphic. What we really know as we're thinking about our students and their growth as learners in all aspects of who they are as people, that the most important thing in helping them become, as you can see here, helping them acquire the skills, knowledge, attitudes to achieve their individual potential, the most important thing in that is the teacher in the classroom. But I want to make sure that it's understood that when I say teacher in the classroom, I'm talking about all of the adults that positively impact our students, from the time they get on the bus in the morning to the time they get to their classroom, to all the different classes they're able to take, to the lunch that they're served, to the visit they have to the office to drop something off or pick something up. It's all of those people who are positively impacting our kids every single day and have the greatest impact on their success. So I want to give you a little bit of background information on why we are where we are at today. Well, as I stated previously, we have a long and very proud tradition of working with our community to plan forward for the future of our students. And you'll see that later tonight when our amazing principals get up and start to speak to you about the goals for each of their schools related to Portrait of a Graduate. That's another example of how our community has worked together to plan for the future of our children. But as a community, we are faced with two significant challenges. And the first has already been referred to a couple of different times tonight, and that is the lack of state funding. And the second is really how that lack of state funding and the competitive marketplace interferes with our ability to retain and attract amazing educators. So the graphic that really tells this story, and a lot of people are surprised by this when they see it, is that in 2002, we were ranked number 11th nationally as far as spending per pupil, state aid spending per pupil. By 2020, we were 25th in the nation. We went from 11% above the national average in spending to 6% below. And what's really remarkable about this is that it's the largest drop in national ranking of any state in this time period. And that does not even include the 21-22 and 22-23 school years that have had 0% increases in state funding, despite the fact that we're in a considerably inflationary time. So how does that play out for us in our budget? And we're at a very high level here, and we understand that, but it's important for people to know the chunks, the big chunks of our budget. Well, of our operating budget, 90% of that is determined by the state, and that's about $55 million that's determined by the state. The other 10% we really don't have control over either, but the state has control over that 90%. Of our entire operating budget, 80% of it is spent on staffing and benefits. And that makes sense because I just finished talking about the fact that it's our people that make the difference. So that's where the funding should go, to the amazing people who do the work on behalf of our students and families. And then there's, of course, a 0% increase in state funding per student, and that has had a big impact on us. So here's another illustration of how that goes, and it's related to actually something that one of the speakers spoke to us about, and that is how the percent in state funding does slightly trail, that's the orange line, the line of CPI, which is the blue line. But boy, when it really takes a hit, as you can see from the graph, is 21-22. That's when the percentage change in funding from the state goes to a 0, and you see the blue line representing inflation going significantly higher than it has been in the past. This leaves us with a very major financial gap. For the 21-22 school year, the difference between the orange line and the blue line is $2.9 million. For 22-23, and that's the reason for the dotted lines, it could be anywhere from 3.6 to 4.8, depending on where inflation ends or winds up at the end of this year. So what impact does that have on our students and on our teachers? Because for our students, it's about keeping those amazing teachers in the classroom or in the lunchroom or in the office or on the bus on the way to school, keeping all of those people with them. We have been for a very long time a destination district, and what I mean by that is when someone graduates from college and they're hoping to get an interview for their first job as a teacher, we're one of the districts that they hope they get hired at. And we love that, and that's great. It's also one of the places that people who are moving to the area, they look and they decide they want to be here. We also, despite the fact that we've had 2 years of 0 increases to base pay, 2 years in a row, we still have a very high staff retention rate, and we want to keep that. We have to be able to offer compensation that keeps up with inflation and is competitive with our neighbors. And if you look at the chart on the bottom, you can see that despite the fact that there has been CPI of 1.23 and 4.7 for the last 2 years, the increase in base pay for our staff, and that's every position, has been $0. So if we go back over the course of the last 2 years, what we wish we had been in the financial, we had the financial ability to do for our staff in order to keep them here, is to pay, to have a 5.93% increase. But instead, it's been 0. And we don't know what 23-24 will be like because we don't know what the financial picture will be like. So what is really the bottom line in this particular situation? If we want to continue offering the highest quality education and services to our students, and we know how important that is, we're not talking about adding all kinds of fancy things. We're talking about keeping the amazing quality of education and services that we currently have. If we want that, and I believe we all do, then we have to keep the amazing, excellent educators we currently have and attract new ones when the time comes. And it is happening in an increasingly competitive market. And I'll give you an example. This is really the first year where we've had a significant number of people to whom we have offered jobs turn us down because they are earning more in other neighboring districts. That has not been a problem before, and it is becoming a problem now. We're feeling the impact already. And as was stated previously this evening too, there are fewer people going into the profession. And why? I have no idea, because I still believe it's the best one in the world. But there are fewer people who are entering the profession. Consequently, there will be districts competing for the same people. And we want to be able to offer competitive salaries to keep our great people here. We don't want anybody to have to make the hard decision to go elsewhere when they really want to be here too. So what solutions do we have? Well, we have continually reviewed our budget, analyzed our spending. One of the big pieces that came from that, of course, was the change in health insurance that allowed us to lock in some lower costs and lock in some rates. And that was a very hard decision. People didn't want to change health insurance while we were in a pandemic. But it was the fiscally responsible decision to make because it allowed us to save, I had to review the numbers with Andy, but it allowed us to save $600,000 over a few years. And that's really a lot of money when we're talking about a budget that's currently in deficit. We also used our one-time ESSER funds, or federal funds that were supposed to be for COVID-related expenses. We used them for COVID-related expenses and to support our students with short-term mental health and academic support positions. And we also did some work to restructure debt. And all of that led to a decrease in the impact of any potential referendum by $2 million. Now, I just want to talk just briefly about one-time funds because they're in the paper a lot, and we're very grateful for them. So on August 30th, right before school started, Governor Evers announced an allocation of one-time federal funds. And as I said, this is great, and we are grateful. And for us, it was $350,000 in total. However, we already had a budgetary deficit of $650,000 because prices have gone up and funding hasn't. Consequently, we had to use this one-time fund to decrease the deficit in our budget so that it came down to a $300,000 deficit as opposed to $650,000. But that's a one-year solution. We'd still be facing a financial cliff of that $650,000 next year. In addition to that, there's also a dollar amount allocated specifically for mental health support. We're grateful for that too, But once again, it's one-time funding. We can't pay long-term bills with one-time funding. And all of it together is less than 1% of our annual salary and benefits budget. So what are other districts doing? Because I'm sure that's on people's minds as they're listening to this. Well, they're using the one-time funds for operations, similar to what we just had to do. They're reducing services and staff, and of course that leads to an increase in class sizes, something that we're all hoping to avoid through a different way to look at funding. They're receiving funds from last year's referendum in April. Several of them went then, and several are going this November. As a matter of fact, 8 out of 16 in Dane County are going, and you see all of the districts on the screen as far as the ones who are going for an operational referendum on the November 8th ballot. In the state, there's 40 different school districts going for an operating referenda. And that is important to note because this is not an Oregon problem. This is not a Dane County problem. This is a state of Wisconsin problem. However, we are talking about it tonight within the context of what we can do within the Oregon school district. So this summer, we met with, we held several open houses, some engagement sessions to really invite people in and understand what's important to them. Here's the challenge we're facing, and then we asked them what's important to you. And we provided some of these things that we consider to be priorities and then asked them, how do you feel about this? And it was wonderful to be able to talk to people because while everyone may have some varying opinions on one point or another, there was a lot we agreed upon. Like the importance to continue to attract and retain the best educators, to keep good and sensible class sizes, to continue to provide the important mental health services, to make sure that our staff salaries are competitive with neighboring school districts so we aren't putting our great people in the position of having to decide if they stay or if they go. And addressing the operational budget needs that we have right now. As I've mentioned several times, we have a deficit in our operating budget. So the board took action on August 22nd to put this question, or the question that we'll show in a moment, on the November 8th referendum, or on the ballot as a referendum. And the question will be about exceeding the revenue limit by $11.4 million over 3 years. And I'm going to show this to you in a chart on the next one to give you a better idea. So please note the statement that's on the bottom. This chart shows an additional increase each year over 3 years. We are taking 3 years to build up to the $11.4 million ability to tax up to $11.4 million. We're taking 3 years to build up to it because we thought that was much better for the taxpayer than just starting out of the gate by asking for $11.4. So first you have the $98 on $100,000 of assessed property in the first year. The second year it's the 98 plus the 95, and the third year it's the 95 plus the 66, and then it stays. You can see on the bottom it's a recurring referendum. The amount stays at $11.4 million each year thereafter. All of this information is on our website. I really encourage people to take a look. It's very important that you spend some time there because there are a lot of really great FAQs that can help you understand if you don't understand any of this. And it gives you information on how to contact one of us so that we can help you gain a better understanding. Here's the actual question. As I mentioned previously, it's on the back of the ballot, and you can see from the wording that it builds. It builds over 3 years to the ability to levy up to $11.4 million of additional funding. And I think it's important to note that if the state does come through and gives more money to schools, the board also can make the decision to not levy up to $11.4 million because the state has filled some of those budgetary holes. So of course, how you can learn more, there's a QR code on the screen. It takes you to the webpage I spoke about. And then we have another community house, open house on Saturday, 9:30 a.m. at Rome Corners Intermediate School. I hope we can see some people there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bergstrom, for that thorough presentation that you, and again, it's a mirror of the presentation that you've been giving at all the community houses that have happened recently. So I'm going to now open the floor to the board. If there's any board members that would like to make a few statements. Heather, we can start with you if you'd like.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bergstrom, for that presentation. I have 4 things I want to say tonight. I'll be brief. One, seems like there's some school finance confusion in the community, and I totally get that because school finance is confusing. I think we're very fortunate to have Andy Weiland's expertise, and I'm grateful for all the work that he's done. Just like Dr. Bergstrom, he has been at these sessions and continues to answer questions and provide information to people who have questions. I just want to make one point on that the school district is not like a regular business. We don't have the opportunity to increase revenues on our own accord. And so when we're talking about increasing teacher, staff, I like how you say positive impactors, and their salary, this is coming from, their cost of living raise is based on the state providing increase and a per pupil cost. So our hands are tied because this time around it's 0. That's why we're going to referendum, just as 8 of the 16 school districts that Dr. Bergstrom shared in Dane County are doing. The second point I want to say is we are in a tough spot. Repeat, we are in a tough spot. Now I'm going to add on to it. We are in a tough spot because of the legislative increase of $0. One-time funding, Dr. Bergstrom, you took a lot of the things I was going to say here, but one-time funding doesn't cut it. One-time funding from the Fed, one-time funding from the state is not ongoing. It doesn't work to increase the salaries for teachers, bus drivers, paras, custodians, librarians, any of that. The third point I want to share is while being able to provide raises for all of the people that we've been mentioning is my preference, this referendum would not be my preference unless it's necessary. I am in support of it because it's necessary. So I think, if the state of Wisconsin budget surplus supported education, we would not be here. That did not happen. The alternative to this referendum is losing teachers. And even though we do have an incredible culture, I hear all the time that it is not just about the money. I fear that the gap between the districts that pass these referendums and those that don't will be too big. And the fourth thing is I look forward and hope that we do come to a point where the state steps forward with money and we don't have to levy the $11.4 million. But without any knowledge of that happening, we are in this position because of the state legislature. Thank you.
All right, Mary, go ahead.
Thank you. So in early August, the administrative team brought to the board several referendum options. One of them would have allowed us to offer salaries that would be comparable to our best funded competitors. As Mr. King mentioned earlier, I too have significant concerns with people who live on a fixed income and may struggle to meet any increased tax burden. And so it was for this reason that I very much appreciated the recommendation of the administrative team at the August 22nd board meeting that was aimed at keeping the referendum costs as low as possible and while staying moderately competitive, right in that middle zone, and working to keep a mill rate that didn't go up, that didn't skyrocket. Further after that, in September, we as a board had to approve a deficit budget because there simply aren't enough dollars to fund the operations. And that doesn't even allow for any pay increase for our educators. So, I mean, a significant part of this is inflation has challenged the budget. And without a referendum, we need to make cuts. And we need to make cuts that no one wants to be cut. Unfortunately, those cuts would mean that the kids would be the ones to pay the price. While Wisconsin is hit especially hard because of the legislature and the failure to provide appropriate funding, it's become increasingly difficult to recruit and retain educators as well because of a nationwide teacher shortage that has been building for years. But without the ability to offer competitive salaries and bonuses, we would have to be looking at cutting course offerings, co-curricular activities. We would have to look at increasing class sizes, potentially having virtual teachers in the classrooms. Other districts have considered decreasing educational requirements for teachers, as well as several districts in Texas are actually shifting to a 4-day school week so that they can increase the appeal to the teachers so that they can compete nationwide for educators. Each and every one of these options negatively impacts our students. In addition to hurting our students, it negatively impacts the future of our community. From looking at the numbers over the past few years, we know that we are already seeing increased educator turnover. And again, this does not benefit our students. The current state legislator has continued to collect taxpayer money, and that taxpayer money should have been earmarked for public schools. Ms. Inman mentioned that the rainy day fund has an excess of, or has a dollar amount of $1.73 billion. But they have additional excess unencumbered funds and currently have an excess of $8 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy. I think that includes the rainy day fund. Including the rainy day fund. And the legislature is simply refusing to give this money to our schools, to our kids, even though they have a responsibility for funding our public schools. So the ideal situation would be for the state to do what they're supposed to do, and this referendum would be unnecessary. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and so this is the option that provides a solid educational foundation for our learners and to support their ultimate career goals. And I, for one, I don't want my student or any of the students in the entire district to be taught in suboptimal conditions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary. Who would like to go next? We can go to this side of the room. Tim, you want to go? Okay.
For fear of repeating what everybody else has, I'll try to be brief. This referendum is about keeping up, unfortunately. It isn't about dreaming about, the next vision of what a school looks like or the next vision of what a teacher looks like. It is simply about keeping up, which is hard for me to swallow sometimes. I don't like to just keep up, but that's what this referendum is about. It's not about getting ahead. It's about maintaining our leadership position, not extending our leadership position. It's about recruiting, and equally as important, holding on to the best teachers in our market. And without it, we won't. I want to highlight two things from my personal perspective. First of all, this referendum is about stepping in locally until the state returns to their habit, I hate to say it that way, and frankly, their requirement to fund public education in Wisconsin. Secondly, when the state steps back to the table and either retroactively recognizes what we are subsidizing locally or picks up from where we are at that point, we won't need to sustain this recurring element. But until then, it's recurring. We have to do it. It's an important element of keeping the culture we have in place today. In other words, we can make the adjustment to the levy when they return to the table. However, for lack of one of those options, of course, it needs to remain permanent. Bottom line, I support the referendum, and I remain optimistic. I do share optimism with Ms. Pollock and with the Kings. We are optimists in the true spirit of optimism. I do believe this is going to be rectified. It's important and incumbent on all of us to vote when it comes time to vote. Because I know we blame it on the legislature, and they do deserve the blame, but we vote in the legislature. And so we have to vote. With that optimistic spirit, I looked at what the referendum is. There were 5 bullet points that Dr. Bergstrom brought up, and I look at the optimistic side of each of those 5 bullet points because the other side kills me. The pessimistic side of those 5 bullet points are hard for me to read, and we can't afford to do it. So I do not like spending money. I told you that last time, and I'll say it again. I look forward to the state stepping back to the table because the people who are voting those legislatures in, and they will do the right thing. And this will be a painful memory in the not too distant future. So I support the referendum wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Tim. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, I'd like to follow Tim up because I have similar comments, and I as well will try not to repeat. But our community residents get the chance to decide what they want for our children in this community. That's what this referendum is all about. Our state law sets our limits on the amount that our school districts can levy, and this referendum is a question to the voters that want to decide if we want to allow the district to override that limit. On the vein of keeping up, I mean, Tim, like you, I want the Oregon School District to be competitive with our neighboring districts. Our Oregon kids deserve the very best, and as has been said before, compensation and benefits are really just one of the reasons why our staff stay with us. But I believe that gap is continuing to widen, and we really need to take action to minimize that gap. And as we look around, 8 of 16 Dane County school districts are asking for more funding. And as our neighboring districts are increasing their tax levies, we really need to consider that as well. One of the things I've been looking at over the past few weeks, and this is just one measure of comparison, but the mill rates of our neighboring districts, of our competitors. Looking back at the 2021 mill rates, which is the latest values that are on record, we're in about the bottom half of the Dane County school districts. And that's before our mill rate has been reduced through our latest budget proposal for the current school year. That being said, many of those Dane County school districts who already have higher mill rates than us are also going to a referendum this November. So that gap has the potential to widen even further. And then lastly, this really, really demands a lot of emphasis. But if the state does increase funding for education, we have the ability to reduce the levy. And for me as a board member, I would support decreasing our levy and offsetting that tax levy by the amount that would come through in state funding. What we're asking for is that $11.4 million over the next 3 years. And I feel that would be the value that's the value that we have determined we need, and it would be my position to decrease the levy by any additional state funding that we would receive. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Anna.
So many incredible comments from my fellow board members. Thank you all for your leadership tonight. I have a couple of things to add, and some of those are in the vein of the keeping up comment. And one of the things I guess I just want to recognize is I was talking with some folks about the referendum, and they said, well, gosh, Anna, I thought our teachers were in the highest category for compensation. I thought we were in the top compared to our neighboring districts. And I said, well, that was the case back in 2016, right? When our community came out and showed our district and our teachers how much we value them by approving a referendum to exceed the revenue limit to pay our teachers more. But other districts have learned about that. They've caught up to us, and now we're starting to fall behind. And this is really an issue with some of our most veteran educators. We're talking some of the teachers who have been with us the longest, who know our community and our students and our families the best. And we need to keep those people in our district, right? We want to keep those veteran teachers. We're talking about the paraprofessionals and the special education paraprofessionals who are working in our classrooms to help manage all of the things that are happening in these classrooms, to give attention to all of the students who need that extra support. And so we are talking about a huge gap in those positions. We are talking about some of our principals, some of the people, some of the leaders in our schools that we are behind in what we are compensating. And that's where a part of this referendum is to look at how we can make some market rate adjustments to be in a better place within the Oregon School District to show all of our educators how much they are valued. Because when I look at the things that we as a community value, we value the high quality education that our kids are receiving. We value the diversity and variety of classes that are offered to our kids starting at those younger years and all the way up into those high school years. We value the attention and the connection that our amazing educators are giving our kids every single day. We value all of the support systems that our district hears about from our staff on all of the things that are happening to help students who need additional supports and challenge students who need additional challenges. So we're talking about just the whole child and the whole experience our kids have. If we as a community value that, we need to show our teachers that we value that. And unfortunately, we're in a position that is landing on us as a local community to bridge that gap. And like fellow board members have described, if we see additional funding coming our way, we're having a different conversation. And we're able to use those funds to fill those gaps and to make those differences. So I fully support this referendum, and that's really all I have to say tonight.
All right, thanks, Anna. Leslie, you're up if you'd like to say a few words.
Sure. In interest of people really being able to hear me and stuff, I'm going to make it short and sweet and just say I'm going to piggyback on everything my fellow board members have said, but especially that if the legislature does step up and start funding our schools like is their responsibility, I am all for us not taking that additional amount off our taxpayers. I don't feel like that's what we need to do. I think we need to be proactive in taking care of our teachers because they deserve this. They deserve this because they take care of our kids on a day in, day out basis, and they do a excellent job of taking care of them and helping them to rise to the next level. And I think that we've done that as a community, and I think we need to continue to do that to support them. So in that, like I said, I was going to make this short and sweet. I support this referendum. I think that we've made the right choice in the amount that we've needed to do, and I will be voting yes for this.
All right, thank you. I just have a couple of things. One of our primary jobs as school board members is the financial health of the Oregon School District. So we spent a ton of time talking with Andy and our administrators about what kind of financial position we were in. And so contrary to some comments this was the responsible thing to do. We cannot continue as a district with a deficit budget, and we've already made cuts. I think Dr. Bergstrom, you saw, talked about that we made a difficult decision to change health insurance. Nobody around this table wanted to make that decision, but we saved $600,000. We restructured debt because of Andy's expertise. So we have already taken $2 million off this referendum bill, right? So it's our responsibility to look after the financial health. If you ask anyone around this table, did we want to vote to increase taxes of people in this community, the answer is no. We would never have wanted to do that, but we have no choice. And so one thing that I think is important that you've heard board members talk about tonight is a commitment that if the state comes back into the arena of funding public education, which is in the Wisconsin Constitution that they are supposed to do, that this board is committed to reconsidering and looking at lowering the tax levy away from our taxpayers so we don't have to go up to the 11.4 million referendum that we're asking for. You've heard board members talk about that. So that's kind of the head part and the tax part. Now I want to talk about our hearts. These are people that work in our district. They are teachers and social workers and school counselors and bus drivers and food service and substitute teachers and administrative professionals. These are people that are our neighbors, and they've been with our kids day in and day out. They deserve to know that this community cares about them like they've cared for our kids. That's what we're trying to do. As Tim said, we are not trying to make sure that they're the highest paid people in this county. We are trying to give them a sense of what they deserve, and they have not had a base wage increase for more than 2 years. So what I'm speaking to as somebody who's lived in this community for 25 years, who sat on this board for 7 years, I have a lot of faith in our community that they're going to come through. We're going to do this for our teachers. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to information items, which is one of the most important parts of this evening, is hearing more about what our teachers do every day in the classroom. And we spent a lot of time on our Portrait of a Graduate, which is the dream that this community has for the kids by the time they walk across the stage in graduation. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom so we can get to that fun part of the evening that we want to hear.
Thank you, and it will be fun. You'll be, I think, very energized and excited by what you hear tonight from our principals. And I want to put out there that it's National Principals Month. And so isn't that awesome that during the month of October in both board meetings, you will be hearing from our administrative staff at each of the buildings, speaking about the goals that they have for student growth around each aspect of Portrait of a Graduate. So although I mentioned it's National Principals Month, and I'm awfully proud to work alongside all of the principals in the buildings, I want to say that the work you'll hear about tonight is really the work and the leadership of all of the people in the buildings. Just as we said earlier tonight, every one of them contributes something to the growth of our children, academically, social, emotionally, and in other ways too that we will be able to discuss this evening. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tanner for an introduction.
Gina gave me this microphone because she says it works a lot better. So if you don't like the handheld one and don't want to pass it around, y'all can just take turns coming up and sitting in the seat if you want. Doesn't that sound nice? That's very nice. Okay, so we didn't rehearse the whole seating and passing thing, so we'll figure out what... There was actually a debate about standing versus sitting. Sitting apparently won, so that's where we're at right now. Oh, and Katie's bringing us the magic clicker. Awesome. All right, well, we are, boy, this is going to be a coordinated effort. All right, so good evening. I'm John Tanner, Director of Learning and Student Achievement for the district, as most of you know. And we're really excited to share with you tonight the data and goals for our students. We want to share it within the context of our mission and values and our Portrait of a Graduate, all of which have been discussed already tonight. So as always, we start, like Dr. Bergstrom said, we start every presentation with the mission and what we value. This is no exception. Look at that graphic. So the mission is to help students acquire the skills, knowledge, and attitudes to achieve their individual potential. And our 5 values, which you can see on the screen, were developed, Dr. Bergstrom mentioned this too, by community members over several days a few years ago. So that was a community effort that happened about 6 years ago or so. And they've been pivotal in every decision that we've made since then. So these are long-standing values that have guided our thinking. In fact, it's our mission and our values that drove the work which developed the Portrait of a Graduate. Hey, it worked. Nice job. Okay. So this is the Portrait of a Graduate, which is a fairly new graphic. So I just want to talk a little bit about this for those who may be watching. The Portrait of the Graduate is our vision of what our graduates should be like as a result of their experience in the Oregon School District. The portrait was created with our community through focus groups, open houses, and dialogue with our stakeholders. The visual is symbolic of leaves on a tree that grow over time. And you'll notice that the foundational root trunk / leaf is the competency one. That's the one that's on the bottom. And these are the academic requirements for graduates that are outlined in Board Policy 41101, and it's why the school district exists. In addition, we have character and culture combined into one, critical and creative thinking, and also community. So altogether, these are the components that contribute to a well-rounded graduate who's ready for the world. So what you'll see tonight, we are doing this in stages. So tonight you're going to see the beginning of a student's journey from the 4-year-old kindergarten through grade 6, and grades 7 through 12 will come later. The first half of tonight's presentation is about what our K through 6 school, or 4K through 6 schools have in common. So while each school is unique and special in its own way, there are some common expectations and goals and action steps that they all go through. You'll see a presentation from 4K coordinator Lindsay Engelhardt, and then a presentation from our K6 principals, and they are going to collaboratively describe each of the 4 elements of the portrait of a graduate that are common amongst all of our schools. So the unified K6 presentation showcases the collaboration of our team to offer similar high-quality practices across schools throughout the district. We're presenting as a K6 team to highlight the collaboration between all the sites and the coherence of our approaches. So that being said, sometimes the schools have slightly different approaches to things. This allows them to pilot ideas, to learn from each other, and to localize decision-making to encourage innovation and find new solutions, which then they can share with each other. So the second half of the presentation is going to highlight the unique and collaborative solutions that school leadership teams have developed for their individual schools. There's a couple things that we'd like you to look for and notice during the presentation. The first is to look at the focus, please focus on the portrait of a graduate components with our youngest grades, and how schools are being intentional about cultivating each one of those components in a developmentally appropriate way. And that's important because it looks a whole lot different for our little tiny ones versus our high school students. The second thing that we'd like you to notice is to note the overlap between the different leaves in the portrait of a graduate graphic, because many of the examples that you see will cover multiple areas. This is part of that integrated approach that we use. With that said, I will turn it over to Lindsay Engelhardt to share our 4-year-old kindergarten program, and then we'll continue as the presentation goes. Would you like my cool mic? All right.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay Engelhardt. I serve as the new Early Learning and 4K Director for our district. To begin, to the untrained eye, sorry, I should go on my next slide. To begin, to the untrained eye, if you were to walk into any of our 7 4K community sites, you may feel like you are being met with noise, children going in every direction, and toys scattered everywhere. Under the surface, and to the trained eye, however, you would be able to highlight the emergent numeracy skills of a learner counting apples in the pretend orchard in the dramatic play area, the growing communication skills of a friend asking another to play together, a child noticing the first letter in their name in their environment, or the small group of students problem-solving their roles in their imaginary game. These skills are all tied directly to the district's 5 values and portrait of a graduate, and will be highlighted throughout this presentation. As we begin with looking at data, I would first like to highlight our district's value of the whole child. As a district, we celebrate both academic growth and social and emotional learning, both of which are rapidly developing in children ages 0 to 8. Much of the growth cannot be captured by just a percentage, and I hope the stories shared through the slides help to capture each of the aspects our teachers consider as they plan for students to be able to think creatively and innovatively on a variety of levels, all while through purposeful play opportunities. Our literacy goal for the 21-22 school year was that 90% of learners in 4K would be proficient with expected literacy skills as measured by PALS and/or the 4K report card. We met our goal with 90% of learners showing literacy proficiency overall. An impressive 99% of 4K learners in June were proficient in the ability to write their name. 92% of 4K learners were proficient with their beginning sounds. Reflecting on last year's data, our goal for this school year is that 100% of our 4K students will be proficient with identified literacy skills. While this is a lofty goal, it's always our goal for each and every student to meet benchmarks, though research would say it's developmentally appropriate for about 90% of 4 and 5-year-olds to be achieving proficiency. Teachers are administering their baseline assessment this month, and we plan to achieve this goal by continuing to deliver high-quality Tier 1 instruction. 4K teachers work to personalize literacy instruction to the needs of each child and emphasize repeated exposure to concepts and skills by utilizing songs, games, sensory activities to embed teachable moments through play. As I collected pictures for our slides this evening, these two pictures exemplifies the multiple cross-disciplinary connections that students engaged in during both of these literacy experiences that have already happened this school year. The picture on the left shows two students engaging in the Hungry Caterpillar game. To begin, students read the text, "The Very Hungry Caterpillar." Then, students painted half of the egg carton using the colors of their choice to create their very own caterpillar. The activity was then tied to math, where students created their own die using number stickers 1 through 3 and 2 pom-poms. Students rolled the die and moved their pom-pom to the correct number of spaces, practicing one-to-one counting correspondence. Students played with their partner until one partner made it to the end of the egg carton, where they practiced good sportsmanship. The site sent home the materials for the activity to showcase their learning and to give opportunity to engage in math at home. This one activity included several intertwined learning concepts, all with a focus on playing a game, including literacy, numeracy, sportsmanship, and family partnerships. As a larger part of this activity, students also spent time reading and learning about the life cycle of a butterfly and had the opportunity to take care of a live caterpillar all the way up until it turned into a monarch butterfly. The picture on the right shows students engaging in building Matman. Matman is a character in one of our literacy curriculum resources, Handwriting Without Tears. Matman is created by using wooden curves and lines, which also supports early letter formation skills. Students build Matman also helps with body awareness and parts to include when drawing a person. Students also engage in the Matman song while building him to the tune of "The Bear Went Over the Mountain." This is an example of an activity where students engage in an activity which is both enjoyable and allows them to experiment and gain confidence in their pre-writing skills. Our math goal for 21-22 school year was that 90% of learners in 4K would be proficient. The spring data collection by sites was recorded in a variety of ways, which made calculating the data very challenging. 98% of students were proficient in the ability to count to 20, and 97% of students proficient in counting one-to-one correspondence, and 69% proficient in the ability to read numerals 0 to 10. 4K uses the Bridges curriculum, the same as our K-5 students. And during our August professional development, teachers identified small group math instruction as an area they want to focus on this year. These 3 math strands that I mentioned above are those we look at specifically for proficiency when students enter kindergarten. Reflecting on last year's data, our goal for this year is again 100% of 4K students will be proficient. This is similar to the literacy goal that we strive for. And a specific goal for me is to provide clarity around the data collection to ensure that it's recorded in a way that can be easily determined if the student is proficient on a specific math skill or if they're not quite there yet and need some additional support. The photo on the left shows a 4K student helper engaging with the number corner, part of our Bridges math curriculum. The student helper is practicing one-to-one counting the days of the month thus far while leading their class in choral counting. A student helper allows students to build confidence and effectively communicate with their peers while building their leadership skills. The calendar shows green and red apples, where students target the skill of recognizing patterns. The photo on the right shows students identifying the numeral and then working on their fine motor strength as they match their pegs into the foam that represents the correct number shown. Again, both math activities incorporating multiple disciplinary approach. Building character and culture in 4K starts day one and continues throughout the entire school year. We are seeing in particular this year, students having challenges with regulating their emotions and being able to identify how they are feeling. This year, our social and emotional learning goal is that all learners in 4K will be able to expand their emotional vocabulary through the use of visuals. This photo represents one of our site's morning meeting time. Students are singing along to greet each other and ask how each student is. The teacher calls each student by name, and they have the chance to be the spotlight and have a chance to share about what's going on in their world. The culture is built around respect and kindness by participating and making eye contact with the student whose turn it is. Each of our 7 4K sites have their own unique feel and all begin their day with a morning meeting in which they greet students. This flexibility allows each site to create and have its own culture, while what connects us all together is our values, goals, and framework. Just as we strive to build character and culture with our students at our 4K sites, we also work to build it within our 4K educators. Each month, we have a 3-hour professional development training that all 4K teachers attend. This is an opportunity for us to collaborate, learn, and provide feedback together, while related to our district values and goals. For example, we had our professional development day for October this past Friday, where we determined we would be reading the book Conscious Discipline together to learn about how to regulate ourselves, which will then be able to help provide strategies and techniques to allow our students to get into a regulated state. This book comes after the last few years of doing book studies with the text Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain and Reaching and Teaching Children with Trauma, both focusing on that student center, while most recently focusing more on the teacher, Reading Onward, where educators could focus on taking care of themselves so that they can be fully present to guide and teach the learners in front of them. Critical and creative exploration is continuously happening in each day at our 4K sites, and very often through purposeful play activities. Through each of the learning experiences our 4K students have, we are building them to obtain the ability to be motivated, creative, and lifelong learners. As you can see on the picture of the left, students are engaged in a science activity. This started with literacy. They were reading Mouse Paint, where they were learning about how colors, each of the primary colors when mixed together creates a secondary color. They were working with pipettes to work on that pinching fine motor skill, and then had the opportunity to independently work in a Petri dish and then share their excitement with their peers. On the right, students are engaged in their dramatic play area, welcoming the fall market for October. They are focusing on their math with counting and basic addition of adding items from the fall market together, and having the opportunity to role play both as the provider and as the consumer. As I have mentioned several times tonight, our 4K program is made up of 7 different sites in our community. 5 of our sites, Oregon Daycare, Oregon Preschool, Little Angels Learning Center, La Petite, and Starlight, are all within the Village of Oregon. And 1 site, Mariposa Learning Center, is at the far north end of our district, and Heart of Brooklyn at the far south. Another large component of our 4K program is our family outreach hours. The overarching goal of each of our family outreach events is to build the connection and communication with the student and their primary caregivers. To kick off September, we had our 4K kickoff event that took place at Kaiser Park Shelter. Families were invited to come and meet other families in their class and also other 4K families in the district. We partnered with the Oregon Public Library, where they set up a story walk, gave out information about their 1,000 books before kindergarten, and had applications for students to sign up for a library card. Teachers from each of our sites were also present to build relationships and continue to engage with students in a community setting outside of their classroom. Each month, we hold an event somewhere in our community and always strive for the same goal of having families come together, build relationships, and make connections. The one part I haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about tonight is the early learning component, when reality is it builds the foundation on everything we do. We partner with the Community Education Program to provide learning opportunities for our earliest learners, such as our play crew friends. Additionally, we held a 3-year-old developmental screening in September and filled all of our spots. This is an opportunity to have 3-year-olds living in this district to come and be screened on their developmental development in the areas of motor, concepts, and language. Another resource we provide is a free professional development opportunity for our preschool teachers in the community to attend. This is an opportunity to bring preschool teachers together who can engage in the learning around developmentally appropriate experiences for our 3-year-olds, all well aligned to the district's goals and values. When we think of 4K, it's the building blocks to build from the ground up, and we all know that the value of relationships start at the beginning and continue to build as they go through the Oregon School District. Thank you.
The next section, we will be talking about literacy and also math, as this is the competency leaf. When we look at student data for literacy, we look at 2 different areas. We look at proficiency of students, and we also look at growth of students. About 5 or 6 years ago, we really began to focus as a district on growth of our learners because we realized that proficiency wasn't everything. We look at that proficiency score, but also all of our learners, are they meeting those grade level expectations, but are they also growing? Because we want every one of our students to be able to grow in their learning journey. At the kindergarten through 6th grade level, we use multiple measures to look at growth and achievement. And we look at students with IEPs as well to see if they're making growth in their IEP. It's a critical component. We take a comprehensive approach to know our learners and support their learning. Learners show their knowledge in a variety of ways based on their readiness to learn, their learning style, and the assessment tool that we are using. In our kindergarten through 6th grade classroom, standardized assessments such as Rigby, Fonson-Pinnell, STAR, and PALS are administered during 3 data winters, one in the fall, one in the winter, and one in the spring. Proficiency benchmarks are determined based upon the nationally normed assessments that we use. School-based teams meet to analyze the level of students, but also look at the progress of every learner, which helps teachers individualize their classroom instruction so that all learners, again, are pushed to continue their learning progression. When looking back at last year's data, our literacy scores showed that we had 83% of our students were proficient readers. When we looked at growth of our students, so those that showed a growth of 1 year or more, we had 77% of our students make that target. When we looked at those students who made proficiency and or growth, we were at 93% of our students meeting that target. We will talk more in a little bit about how we will really be looking at that growth target in our next school year. We had variations in data across school sites. A lot of our school goals are based on our theory of action, which is very different from each school and is really individualized for the learners at our building. It's really critical that our teachers know our students that didn't meet those goals. And our teachers know those students, and they have created action plans to help those students meet that proficiency and or growth. One of the things that we do at our building is we have student services meeting, and I know that that is in other schools as well. And that is time where our psychologist, our counselor, our interventionist, our administrators all meet together to plan for supports for a student. Interventionists are pushing into classrooms supporting students. Interventionists are pulling small groups of students out. So our teachers really work to plan and individualize supports for our students. You'll hear more about the work we'll do as we continue to support all of our learners. This summer, leadership teams looked at that data to plan our next steps.
Okay, so as Dawn shared about literacy, I'm going to speak a little bit more specifically to numeracy, or our math progress, as K6 cites for the past school year. So one thing that you heard in Dawn's presentation was that we have multiple assessment measures that are standardized that we use to look at both student proficiency and student growth each year. And while we have multiple measures for math, we really only have one standardized assessment measure that is consistent, primarily 1-6, given that our kindergarten learners are still working on those foundational math skills. And that standardized assessment is a STAR math test, which is a computerized test. And while that does give us really valuable information, we also recognize that one point in time on a computerized multiple choice test may not give us all of the information that we need about our learners and where they're at and how they're growing in their work as mathematicians. So we are working with our K-8 math coordinator and across sites to explore second data points this school year, and you'll hear more about that in a moment. But both last year and this year, different teams have made collective decisions about what data points are most valuable to their knowledge of students and how to support and inform their instruction. So for some grade levels, that might be kind of a comprehensive assessment that looks at the year's worth of skills, whereas other grade levels, that might be a unit assessment or a screener. And we use those really to inform our practice so that our teachers know where our students are at and how we can continue to push them forward in their growth as mathematicians. So as Dawn kind of mentioned, with literacy, we also have 3 windows that are more formal that we look at this data using the STAR assessment and our second data points in the fall, winter, and spring. And last year, at the end of the year in math, we had 79% proficient in math. And again, reminding you that that's just based on one standardized assessment measure. So in literacy, we're able to look for proficiency using a variety of tools, whereas math, we really only have one way to consistently and in a normed way assess whether a student's proficient. When we looked at whether students made 1 year's growth, so taking proficiency off the table in math, we had 69% made 1 year's growth. But when we looked at whether they were proficient or made 1 year's growth or more, we had 88% in math. So you'll notice that those numbers are a little bit lower. We have some action steps to address that, in addition to our second data point and steps we're taking to further support and enhance our math instruction. Again, based upon the site, as Dawn mentioned, some of our schools had different emphasis in math and literacy based upon their dedicated work and their theory of action. And so that's something that we continue to bring back and talk about so that we can improve our practice as K6 schools and utilize the knowledge of one another to share what is working really well for our students and what can continue to push us forward as we all pilot different programs. Or not programs, but different techniques and strategies. You want to go to the next one? So based on this, Dawn and I collaborated on the math and literacy slide here, so she may chime in if I miss something, but we have a very similar goal for both math and literacy. And while in our day-to-day work they are separate, given that they're 2 separate content areas, the nature of the goals is very much the same for both math and literacy. And that is that during this school year, we want 100% of our learners to show at least 1 year's growth as measured by those OSD chosen benchmark assessments and or their IEP goals, recognizing that some of our students have individualized plans to meet their needs, and we want to use growth measures that reflect their learning styles and supports. One piece of our goal that is depicted in the graphic that I'll explain in a moment is that we have kind of a tiered approach. So we want all learners to make at least 1 year's growth, so growing from where they start to where they end in the school year. However, we recognize that some students are maybe behind where we would hope they would be in terms of the benchmark proficiency scores, and we don't want to maintain that status quo of them being behind or not having those grade level skills. And so we have a tiered goal to try to close the gap, is how we phrase that, so that students are making gains and reaching towards those grade level expectations, end of year expectations, alongside their peers. So we're hoping that this graphic helps to explain that. So as you look at the numbers, that's kind of to indicate the beginning of the school year. So in lane 1, you see a learner that starts the year right where we would expect them to be based upon those nationally normed benchmarks. So they start the year where we would expect by those benchmarks, and then they make 1 year's growth to the end of the year where they finish, which is based upon, again, those nationally normed benchmarks. So they would make 1 year's growth. Then we have a learner in lane 3 who comes into the same grade level a little bit further ahead in terms of their understanding of the standards and skills of that grade level. And we still want to push them to make 1 year's growth. We don't want to be satisfied with them having the skills and concepts of the grade level and not continuing to push their learning forward. And so again, they may end up a little further ahead, but we want to continue to push their thinking and understanding and growth as a learner in their learning journey, especially to promote that sense of lifelong learning and enjoyment of school. In lane 5, we have an example student who maybe is not quite at the grade level benchmarks at the beginning of the year. And so based upon that, you'll notice kind of to scale that their growth target is a little bit bigger than those in lanes 1 and 3. And that's because we are really striving to support that student and build up their skills so that they can start to close that gap and catch up to the skills and get closer to those end of year grade level benchmarks and standards when they reach the end of the year. So based upon that, we have this tiered goal where we want all of our learners to show that growth, but depending on who they are and what they need, that level of growth may look a little bit different. We also will use, to measure this goal, use a variety of assessment measures, not only to measure, but to also guide our practice in the moment. And we want to be responsive to our learners to ensure that we are getting as much growth and movement forward as possible. And we also wrote this goal across K-6. We spent quite a bit of time this summer developing the goal together because we find it really important for us to be tightly aligned so that we can talk about what we're doing and we can measure and have conversations about our students. The curriculum we're using, the instructional strategies we're using, the individualized approaches at different buildings that we're using to have common language and a common understanding of what we're doing and how it's working to support our students so that we have that common knowledge to talk about the growth across sites. So this is really particularly important, as you'll hear about in a minute, as different schools have some different pilots going, implementing new instructional practices based on current research, and then we can bring that data back together as we go at different points through the year to talk about how it's working and supporting our students in their learning.
All right, Anna shared our goals. Now we're going to talk about how we will achieve those goals, our action step to achieve those goals. The first image here is a picture of our MLSS, multi-leveled systems of support. You may have seen this graphic before. Mr. Tanner has shared this at a board meeting or two. We are really going to focus the competency part on the inner core of this graphic. You will hear tonight the outer core or the outside of it talked about in the other presentations. When you look at the multi-level systems of support, it's really a continuum that really helps our students become striving to thriving. It guides us when we think about implementing different levels of supports for all of our students. In our action step, we thought it would be very important to look at data differently this year. Really look at data holistically and see if we could find trends or gaps in our data that help us indicate where we need to examine our practices or our instruction to meet the needs better of our diverse students. As an administrative team, this summer we did some learning around how to analyze data, how to look for those trends, and develop action plans based upon our findings. Each school worked at a building level as a leadership team this summer to also dive deep into data and to look at those trends. Buildings disaggregated their data. Some buildings disaggregated by growth, some by proficiency, and some buildings looked at growth and proficiency. Each building has identified a subgroup of students that they want to intentionally talk about and plan for this school year in hopes of improving the proficiency and the growth outcomes for this subgroup of students. We as an administrative team recognize that when we focus on a subgroup of students, it helps us elevate our approach for all groups of students. All students benefit when we critically examine our own practices, our potential biases that might help learning not work. We need to make learning more engaging, accessible, and authentic to our students. Collaboration is something that is a critical component of the work that we do at our buildings. You may have heard about PLCs before, professional learning communities. All of our schools are continuing to move forward with our professional learning communities, all of us at our different stages in our journey. Professional learning communities are held with grade level teachers or specialty teachers and instructional coaches around collaboration of student work. Teachers look at student work, they look at progress towards standards, and the instructional practices that they're doing in all of their classrooms. Teachers use the PLC framework to guide their instruction while being responsive to their students' learners. CCVs are also a high-quality instructional practice. Collaborative classroom visits is what CCVs stand for. CCVs are important because it gives colleagues a chance to go into each other's classroom and see what instructional practices they are using. It gives colleagues an opportunity to reflect before observations happen and after observations happen. And we know that professional educators are always learning from one another, so it continues our improvement cycle. Data. We've talked about this throughout the presentation. It's really important for us to use multiple types of data. At PLCs, teams look at data constantly. That's what really drives their work. This summer and over the last year, I think the coaches have read a book called Street Data. This street data has really made me, I know, reimagine my practices along with my colleagues as well about how we use data in the buildings. Over the years, we have used satellite data most of the time to plan and think about our instruction. Satellite data is analyzing patterns in data. We've also used map data a lot. Map data, it could be a math unit assessment, it could be a running record. Map data helps us analyze gaps. Now, we are going to be looking at something called street data. Street data really takes us down to the ground level to listen to the voices and experience of our students, staff, and families. This is a new component for us, and our schools are really excited to use this. You may hear that some schools are using empathy interviews. This would be a type of street data. It would be a conversation with a student that would help a teacher inform their practices in a classroom. It's really important for us to focus on that micro level data because we know that it will improve the data that comes at the top. So that map data and satellite data we know will improve when we focus on that street data.
Another important action step that we all value here in the Oregon School District is our staff professional development. And when we talk about staff professional development, not only are we talking about the days that are built into our school calendar, but we're also talking about our pathway days, which were part of a previous referendum from the community. So we have staff professional development that takes a lot of different sizes and shapes. And a lot of our staff professional development right now is focused on current educational research, standards, new methods, and best practices. I think it's also really important to note that DPI in the last few years has come out with not only some revised standards, but some shifts to the standards that have really guided some of the intention and focus of our professional development so that we understand the standards and also use the curricular tools we have to adapt and ensure that we are meeting those state standards in the various content areas. So you will hear a little bit about that as we dig into some professional development opportunities that we are offering in both literacy and math. Specific to literacy, our K-6 teachers have been doing a lot of learning related to the sciences of reading and the development of foundational literacy skills. And this was something that we knew about, but we recognized we needed to do a deeper dive to better understand, especially because there's been some recent research on how important this is to the development of our earliest learners and their reading skills and literacy skills. So one professional development offering that a lot of our K-6 educators, particularly K-4, are taking this year is a 55-hour at least class called Letters that stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, and really focuses on those foundational literacy skills and offers opportunities for teachers to dig in and practice some of those strategies and techniques and then come back and talk about them together with the facilitator from the Letters company. We also are offering professional development on decodable text, which is another area that we've learned about through our foundational literacy learning. We have professional development on dyslexia. We have professional development about incorporating more diverse mentor texts into our classroom libraries so that we have windows and mirrors for our students. And two other things that are more curricular based is we have implemented the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Curriculum at the K2 level this year. So there's been some intentional professional development around that to support teachers with that implementation. As well as this summer, there was a curriculum review team that looked at our current K5 ELA literacy curriculum and recognized that based upon those new shifts and standards from DPI, that our program was not meeting the needs of our learners, both in terms of the data and our core values. And so based upon the recommendation of that team, the district is exploring a pilot of 2 new curriculums this year where teams and teachers have volunteered to explore 2 different curriculums looking at the same standard, which will provide a really unique opportunity to look at how 2 different tools work to support students in learning of similar skills and standards. In addition, in math, we also have professional development offerings. There are also new shifts to those standards. 2 that I think are interesting and I want to touch upon so that you know about them are adding math identity and agency into the math standards. So building that identity as mathematicians for our students, and also students being flexible users of mathematics. So seeing how mathematics can be flexibly used to influence their daily lives. And so there is some intention, there's a scope and sequence of professional development to meet teachers at different stages in their learning and understanding of those shifts and standards that will be rolled out this year and in the next few years to support our teachers in that learning, as well as our 6th grade teachers found that there were some areas in their past curriculum that needed to be looked at with the new shifts and standards. And so there are some pilots for 6th grade math curriculum as well, and teams of teachers looking at that to make some decisions going forward about what will best meet the needs of their students. Our final action step really links into the continuum of supports, which some board members may remember. We have an OSD continuum of supports, or the diamond, which is connected, I think, importantly to point out, to the DPI MLSS visual that we are using tonight. And that's that we want to talk a little bit about our action steps related to intervention, and remind everyone that intervention is not just for our striving learners, it's also for our thriving learners. So we're going to just briefly touch on that tonight, that the board did approve, as part of the ESSER funding to respond to the impacts of COVID, approved more math intervention time. And as I spoke to a bit ago, I think you can see that math is something that we do want to continue focusing on and supporting our students with. Specifically, our math interventionists, with that additional allocation, which at most elementary levels was an additional 0.3, that allows them to do more push-in work in the classrooms to support the core instruction and differentiate to meet student needs, as well as to support some small groups that are working on some really individualized and focused skills that will help them access the classroom instruction. And so that, even in just these first 6 weeks of school, has been really impactful at all of our buildings to support our math learner needs. We also are continuing to have our reading intervention support, but as you just heard about, our reading interventionists are really focusing on their learning about the sciences of reading and the foundational literacy skills. So they're incorporating a new curricular program called Sunday to support phonics-based intervention, to support our students with phonics-based needs that are struggling with the decoding and access to text at the very foundational level. In addition, our advanced learning teachers and our advanced learning program is also supporting our thriving learners and providing opportunities for extension and push-in support outside of the realm of those who qualify for the advanced learning based upon those benchmarks. And so at various sites, we are working to explore ways to push in our advanced learning teachers to provide extension opportunities and enrichment opportunities in different areas that is different than just a grade level curriculum replacement for those that are in need of that in that programming. The last thing that I will share in terms of our intervention practices is that there are several sites that are working to do more push-in intervention, meaning that the intervention teachers and AL teachers come into the classroom so that we aren't pulling kids out for these small groups. And several schools are also doing a WIN model, which some of you may remember from a few years ago, the What I Need model, where it's a universal intervention block where all students have a strategic placement for working on skills with a teacher based upon what they need at that time. And so those are all some different ways that we are continuing to support the continuum of supports as part of our action steps to support our competency goals in literacy and math this year, K-6.
Hello, I'm Cindy Olander from RCI, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our character and culture goal. So our K-6 schools have been working intentionally to prepare our students to be caring and inclusive in our world. Each of our school has their own version of a community building time where students and staff focus on skills specific to their community needs. This opportunity occurs in multiple settings, and we purposely have created partnerships to teach and practice these skills so that everyone feels confident using these strategies in any environment. Based on our 2021 and 22 panorama data, 60 to 79% of our K-4 students shared that they could use strategies to regulate their emotions. This year, our K-4 schools will continue to focus on teaching students emotional regulation. Some examples of this would be teaching problem-solving strategies for when you're in a sticky situation, or providing tools for students can use if they find themselves in the red zone. One tool they use is direct teaching of the zones of regulation. Each zone has a different emotion attached or feeling attached to it. While our bodies begin to feel like in our bodies we can be in any zone, and that's okay, we know that being in the green zone for school is where we want to be for optimal learning. We teach our students to first recognize what zones their bodies are in, and if it isn't the green zone, we actually give them tools to get back to where they need to be. A slight shift in our focus occurs as students transition to a new school. RCI is just a little bit different than K4, and we're focusing on the sense of belonging in order to support our students and have our communities flourish. This is not surprising at RCI because our base data shows just a slight decrease when they come to RCI because they are actually learning new communities and new partnerships compared to where they've been for the past 5 years. At K6, we're focused and intentional about giving our students multiple opportunities to exhibit traits that build the foundation that leads to success in future endeavors and contributes to a caring and inclusive community. Some of these examples would include school-wide assemblies, celebrations, and time together with the sole purpose of building a welcoming and inclusive school. One example is shown here at PVE Learning Together as a school to teach students the expectation at recess. I think that is that Pete the Panther? That's Pete. Every school has a little bit different, but that's Pete the Panther there. So the ultimate goal of this assembly was for students to have to learn how to have a safe, respectful, and responsible recess time. Then check out our picture of our student with our mentor. So the Friends of the Oregon School District offers a mentor program which starts in grade 4. Students are matched with mentors who visit them weekly, and they engage with them throughout their whole school experience, and they actually, most of the time, they transition school to school to school with them and create deep and meaningful, powerful relationships. Our schools also have clubs, which are great ways for students to participate in community outside the academic day. Some examples of these clubs would be Student Council or Green and Healthy Team. And each one of our schools have either a movement, a sensory, or calming space for our students to utilize to move their body to get in the green zone. We also use these spaces to universally teach and encourage our students for movement and mindfulness breaks.
Okay, so I have critical and creative thinking and talking about our students and our staff and how we encourage them to really grow and learn in a variety of situations. And so I couldn't help but notice, Lindsay Engelhardt down there talking about meaningful and engaging experiences for kids. And I think it's important that we carry that all the way through, even up to our high school level. When I really thought about these experiences, I wanted to draw some parallels between what the staff does and what the students do, because really we're doing similar work under different circumstances. So when I think about some of the things that our staff does, Dawn talked really clearly about PLCs and CCVs. And I think about that practice as starting with a question. The question might be, what do we want to do to improve a strand of learning in math? The question might be, how do we increase inferencing skills in our readers? But we take data based on literacy and math, and we come together as a team to examine our practices, be reflective in our work, and to make a plan to move forward. So I think our PLCs highlight that inquiry-based learning. Similarly, CCVs have been really actionable events at each of our sites where we visit each other's classroom. I know I always tell teachers when I leave their classroom after an observation, if I feel like, gosh, I really want to go back to the classroom, I see new learning and excitement in those lessons that I want to go forward with. And so, examining that made us think a little bit about how do we get our teachers into other people's classrooms and have them explore, maybe it's a problem of practice, but maybe it's all that are engaging for kids, again, based on what's going on in their minds. It might not be a problem of practice, but looking for a question to solve or something that piques their interest. For example, and Cindy referenced this, so you're going to see some of the same patterns repeat. Some of the things that kids have done with our green team. An example at one site was building garden beds based on where the sunlight came into the area, based on volume, area, perimeter of the shadow or the garden box, and how we would plant for that season. Likewise, some schools do Genius Hour, where kids have to find a question that's sort of Google proof. You can't put the question in and get a clear-cut answer. It takes some thinking, some problem solving, and some collaborative work. All of these activities are really based on an expertise or an area of interest. And I can't help but see the parallels between what we do as teachers and staff to what our kids do to solve our problems and work together collaboratively. The second part would be leadership. We are really, really strong at all sites about offering all of our staff members areas to shine, areas to show their expertise, to demonstrate their skills and talents. Whether that's on our leadership team, our equity team, we have a dual language immersion team, we have PBIS, we have also staff members looking at new ways to engage and offer trainings to their staff, either at their site or across the district. To me, that's powerful practice when you're learning from someone you respect and work next door to. Conversely, our students also have those opportunities. We've given them opportunities in leadership teams, yearbook clubs, green teams, teacher helpers, safety patrols, other clubs and organizations. And I also would have to mention community ed. I think it's a rare treat that our district offers activities for kids after school in any genre you can imagine. We've had kids do fencing, which terrified me, but it was really good sport for COVID. We've had Lego clubs, we've had, arts and crafts, we've had math, we've had coding, all sorts of opportunities for kids to find what's important to them. And I think at this age, it's really, really critical that we help them find their interest and maybe put them on a path they didn't even think of. So when we go forward with this, literally not working for me. There we go. When we go forward, I guess our goal is to continue to increase opportunities to really involve our staff and our students, and to look for leadership opportunities really with our staff that focuses on collective efficacy and coming together around all those great ideas to funnel our practices into the best experience for kids. Finally, I guess the most important part is, again, creating those authentic learning experiences for kids. They aren't just things from textbooks or scripts or lessons. They are things that kids are really excited about. And how do we work that magic within the classroom to push forward those ideas and enhance learning?
Sorry, I don't want to can you hear me okay? I don't want to throw everybody off, but I've been sitting for way longer than I prefer. It's occurring to me that I'm not sure I've ever presented to all of you. I think I've met some of you. My name's Lindsay Eimerman, and I think for like 17 months now, I've been the principal at Netherwood. And I get to speak to you tonight about probably my most favorite thing in the whole entire world, which is teaching the tiny humans how to human. I absolutely love what I do. This is an absolutely amazing team, and all of the wonderful things that they have spoken to you about are providing our kiddos with opportunities and our staff with opportunities to be the best possible versions of themselves. And my favorite part about this goal is that we're teaching students how to contribute to both their local world, but also their larger world community. And a lot of times in education, we don't get the opportunity to speak right away about what our impact is. In fact, sometimes it can be 10 years before you'll hear or get a sense of what your impact truly was. Over the past 2 weeks, I actually had 2 really authentic opportunities to see my students being leaders and to see my staff being leaders in action. As you all know, 2 Mondays ago, Prairie View had a water main break. And within 24 hours, we had become, I think they called it Prairie Knoll Elementary School. And it was just sort of a combination of the Prairie View staff and the Netherwood staff coming together in the most authentic, supportive way possible. We had both of our student services teams bringing in food and coffee, which our teachers love languages. I had students bringing in like boxes of crayons in case the Prairie View kids had lost their crayons. So it was just a really, really wonderful opportunity for my learners to see what a great experience it can be to do the hard work of serving others. The second thing I want to bring up that's just happened in the past 2 weeks was that we got a letter in the mail from the superintendent of Uvalde Public Schools just 2 weeks ago. So one of my 4th grade teachers had sent letters and also a heart chain. And heart chains were was something else we had done last year at Netherwood, and there's something, the circles, and then they connect all of us. And circles are something that is, I'll speak about it later, they're very important to me. But my 4th grade teacher and her students had sent a heart chain to Uvalde. And so in just the past 14 days, I can tell you that the hard work of all of the humans in this school district really is paying off, because our kids are already changing the world. These are just a couple pictures of some really super fun things. Unfortunately, I only have pictures of Netherwood, so that's what you all get to see. It's a picture of a cerebral palsy celebration that we did for one of our kiddos, assembly that we had, and then our homecoming parade. We like to, at Netherwood, have anyone who would like to walk in the parade walk. So if you're a 4th grader, you have the opportunity to walk. You don't have to, but it's a really nice way to just show that you don't need to be in a special club in order to be valued by our community. The kids on the sidelines really just want to cheer for you. There's a lot of really great other things that happen at the other schools as well. Obviously, we have our Friends of Oregon mentoring program. We also have the Building Buddies programs, where we'll have kindergarten and 4th grade classes that will be building buddies. As you know, we are blessed to have a naturalist in residence who is teaching our kiddos all about stewardship and how do we care for our land, and how are we good stewards of all of the amazing resources we've been given. Again, digital citizenship classes, service projects, helping neighbors in need. I think that I could stand up here all day and talk about different ways that our students from ages 4 to 10, 12, they're so actively involved in their community. We didn't talk about this part.
Okay. In the next part of this presentation, our principals will proudly share some really concrete examples to show how the goals and actions that we've just heard that they have are consistent, are put into practice within their own schools. All of the ideas that you're going to see in the next part of this presentation represent the unique collaborative solution the building teams have brought to the table. Each is unique and different as the people that inhabit their buildings. As you listen to our principals share examples from their schools, please notice how the needs of the students have driven the innovative ideas from each team. Pay attention to the benefit all of our students will reap when we learn from the successes of our colleagues. Each of the upcoming stories of uniqueness will undoubtedly make an indelible and authentic mark on the communities we serve. I sincerely hope that you enjoy listening to the different ways that our K-6 leaders plan to infuse not only the portrait of a graduate into their goals and actions, but how every leader has taken the time and care to ensure that what they are doing honors the uniqueness of the students and the families that they serve.
So I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes specific to a few things that are unique to Brooklyn. So up here on this screen, we have our theory of action, which you've heard about throughout the presentation, but this really guides our building work. And I also hope that you see a lot of the connections that this makes not only to our district values, but also to the portrait of the graduate. So we're really working to build a consistent message, and we have consistent goals, even though this is intentional to our work and daily practice at Brooklyn. So I'm going to dig into kind of the three action items in the middle of our theory of action, just to provide you a few quick examples of things at Brooklyn that we're doing to work on these areas this year. So the first action area of our theory of action really focuses on equitable and authentic opportunities to empower and nurture the whole child. So here's two really unique opportunities that we have going already this year. The one on the left is a book club that our school counselor, Kelly Massey, has already started hosting in collaboration with the PTO. This is the second year that she has hosted a book club aimed for parents and staff to come together around a common reading and talk about the ways that we can better support our kids and have consistent language and supports across home and school settings. There have been amazing parent testimonials from the first book club, which led us to do another one. And it's also, in addition to supporting our kids, has really helped to build the homeschool connection as well. Another really awesome opportunity for our students you'll see on the right is our fourth graders help run the Brooklyn Courtyard Cafe. So the fourth graders actually practice skills of time management and thinking about their own character traits to put together an application to be a barista at our Courtyard Cafe. So they look at their schedules when they have times that they'd be available and what they think that they would bring to the position, and everybody is a barista in their own unique way, and they take orders from staff and prepare tea, coffee, water, you name it, all the different kinds of flavors and creamers today I was hearing about. And then they are able to go at that designated time, deliver that coffee or tea to that teacher. And it's just another way that we're building connection and also just building skills beyond the classroom in terms of how they're building and functioning within our school community. Another area of our theory of action focuses on problem solving and critical thinking to support our independent learners. We have a variety of ways that we do this, but one area that we wanted to touch upon tonight is the work of our kind of PBIS or culture team. They use the data each month to figure out an area of focus, an attribute or character trait that we want to continue to build and support in our students, such as kindness, resilience, empathy for others, celebrating one another and our differences. And so based upon that, we teach around it to teach kids what that means and what that looks like. And then we look for ways that students are showing those attributes throughout the month. So classes are working to earn, you'll see in the bottom left hand, there's a poster there working to show those skills as a class to contribute to kind of a school-wide celebration. And then we also have the one and only Bobby the Bobcat that comes and recognizes the MVBs or most valuable Bobcats that showed that attribute that month. And we keep a running list of that because our goal is that every Bobcat will earn an MVB during their time at Brooklyn. So that's a way that we really work to continue supporting our students in growing the skills beyond the classroom and building those skills in how to work with and relate to one another and become those independent learners that we want them to be. And our final action item in our theory of action is really measuring and reflecting on student growth to be responsive to our students in front of us. And you've heard us talk a little bit about that, especially in the competency section tonight. But Brooklyn is in our second year of the WIN model. So we learned a lot last year and worked out a lot of the kinks in implementing a new structure to our schedule, a new system for our students. And our leadership team spent extensive time this summer and fall building a playbook, which are the general expectations for the WIN model so that staff and stakeholders have clarity in the purpose, intention, and how we work together to best meet the needs of our students, as well as how we come together at our PLC and team meetings to look at the data and ensure that we are meeting each and every student with exactly what they need when they need it. So those are just a few ways that we are continuing to support kind of the district values, the portrait of the graduate in our specific work at Brooklyn.
All right. So similarly for Netherwood, you can see our theory of action in the middle there. And one of the things that has been rather central to my time since I started at Netherwood is kind of a theme of circles. And that might sound a little silly, but in my past life, when I worked in Middleton, I was trained by the International Institute for Restorative Practices all around their circles work. And using community circles was something that had been very effective for me when I was both an administrator in Middleton and then when I worked in Edgerton and then coming here. And so it was something that I wanted to bring to our staff. So you will see that the second of the kind of highlights of our theory of action is all around the idea of using staff community circles. Clicker. Awesome, thank you. Do you want to be Vanna for me? That'd be amazing, thanks. So one of the things, I was showing this to a staff member today, and Erica had asked me to try to get a pic of staff circles, and I said I would, and I failed. So we don't have one of those. But when I was showing it to the staff member, the thing that was really resonating with her was this idea of interbeing. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit about my leadership style and who I am as a leader. And so I thought that one of the things that I could do today is just introduce you to the idea of an opening or a grounding. So an opening or a grounding is something that you do at the start of a circle, and it's intended to mark the time as more sacred than normal. So it might be a time where you are gentler with yourself or you are more understanding of others. And one of my favorite readings for that is by a Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm just going to share that with you tonight. Interbeing. Interbeing is the understanding that nothing exists separately from anything else. We are all interconnected. By taking care of another person, you take care of yourself. By taking care of yourself, you take care of the other person. Happiness and safety are not individual matters. If you suffer, I suffer. If you are not safe, I am not safe. There is no way for me to be truly happy if you are suffering. If you can smile, I can smile too. The understanding of interbeing is very important. It helps us to remove the illusion of loneliness and transform the anger that comes from the feeling of separation. So I think that one of the things that we do very well at Netherwood, and one of the things that I'm proudest of with our work with students and staff, is just the way that we have been able to bring everyone together. From the picture books that we read each month to the lessons that I'm doing in classes, that my school counselor is doing and that staff are doing, really are focused on the idea that we are the strategy. There's no quick fix, there's no book, there's no curriculum. We are the strategy, we are the co-regulators for our tiny humans, and whenever we make a big jump in our learning, is usually when then they will make a big jump in their learning. Perfect. One other thing that we've done this year that was really exciting, a lot of the feedback we got from parents last year was that they were feeling really disconnected, and they were feeling like it had been years since they were invited into the buildings, years since they got to just see what the inside of their students' desk looked like. And so our aim this year for our back to school night was kind of a flipped model, and we planned everything with the focus of our aim being families meeting families. And so it was actually surprisingly an easy lift, because really all we needed to do was set the setting and give the space and time for families to come together. So we did provide the PTO, provided pizza, there was a family game room, there was a glow stick dance party, we had teachers who were dressing up and reading picture books. It was like all and out shenanigans, but it was really, really wonderful, and we did have over 600 folks come through in a 3-hour period. So again, I think it's something I'm incredibly proud of, and I think it kind of speaks to what we've been working really, really hard on in that post-pandemic world, which is helping everyone to realize that we really are better together, and that it really does take a village, and that we need one another. So yeah, that's it.
You will see our theory of action. Our theory of action is very similar to last year, but we have more focused work under each strategy to ensure that all of our students are meeting their full potential. I will focus on 3 different areas of our 5. The first one is creating a safe, caring, and culturally responsive school. there are two things that I would like to talk about. First is our literacy equity team. This year at Prairie View, we are celebrating differences, and we are learning about acceptance. Our literacy equity team is bringing awareness of many groups to our school community by using our morning announcements and Google Slides to share information with students and to build their background knowledge. Teachers are using picture books to build students' knowledge as well. We are also building our school library and classroom libraries so students are continually learning about diverse groups, not just during our focus months. Our first focus month was Hispanic Heritage, and this week we started Disability Awareness. Later this year, students will get the opportunity to share their own family traditions. This work is really important to Prairie View, as we want our students to be mindful that we belong to many different groups. Each Monday, our slides start with this: differences make us curious and are what makes our school and community stronger. Acceptance is treating everyone with kindness and respecting how we are different from each other. We have had great success the first month, and we look forward to more months to come. You will see up on the right side of the TV are the two slides from our two first months, and then some picture books that go with those as well. A second thing that our school is doing to help create that caring environment is our PBIS work that we do. This year, our theme is Possum. Our PBIS team had a great time doing creating that this summer, and we actually found some possum things like bulletin boards and trinkets on Oriental Trading, so it actually was an amazing find and super exciting for our students. Each school day, our students are working on being safe, respectful, and responsible, and students are recognized by their teachers and are given a small ticket. The one thing that our building focuses on is not just the giving of the ticket, but the feedback that comes with that ticket. Really talking with the student about why they are getting that ticket. What did they do that was safe, respectful, or responsible? And then each Friday, tickets are pulled and the students' names are announced, and the whole school gives the students a round of applause. They come to the cafeteria, are able to pick out a small possum panther reward, and their picture is taken, and it's put up on our possum wall that is behind our office. So it's been great excitement for our students, and like Brooklyn, we hope that every student is acknowledged as a possum panther sometime in their time at Prairie View. The next one I will touch upon is how we monitor our student progress and really engage in those professional learning communities. So we've talked about that a lot tonight, but we are going to continue to build strong PLCs. We had a lot of teacher changes last year, and when we had all but one team have different teachers come on board, and new teams can struggle with getting everything off the ground when it comes to PLCs, where we're learning a lot of the curricular strategies and instructional strategies. And so this year we are ready to take off and bring back our strong PLCs that we had pre-COVID. And we'll really work on using student evidence to make our instructional decisions, but also really trying to figure out how can we use that street data. And one way that we are going to start with that is talking to the students who didn't make the growth goals last year, having some interviews with those students to see if we can find some trends in that data. Another thing that we will be continuing to focus on is our learning of academic vocabulary for our students. Last year, all of Prairie View learned about vocabulary instruction by participating in learning sessions on the book Bringing Words to Life. Our next step in our knowledge about vocabulary is taking forward best practices and embedding them into our daily routines at Prairie View. You will see a picture on the left of a word wall from a third grade classroom. This word wall has academic vocabulary, so it's really important for our students in this classroom to be able to see those words and use those words in their daily classroom life. Our third grade team has taken a deeper dive and really wants to learn about ways that they can use academic vocabulary in their classroom. And again, CCVs is the last piece that we will continue to work on. Pre-COVID, we were able to start a strong foundation on that, and we have decided that our first CCVs will focus on foundational reading skills such as phonological awareness, phonics, and vocabulary. So that will be what our leadership team helps kick off first. And the last one I would like to talk about tonight is engaging students in intentional and targeted equitable learning experiences. So 5 or 6 years ago is when we started our WIN model, that What I Need model. And last year was the first year that it was building wide. So this is the second year that kindergarten through 4th grade has a 30-minute block of time scheduled into their day where they are really, teachers are working on intentional skill focus and practice for those students. Another thing that we have is our student leadership team. So our 4th grade student leadership team, that's a picture from Friday's parade. Our student leadership team, our students create an application. Every student is accepted into a team, but they may not get their first choice. So they have to tell us why they would be a great member of that team. And so our teams are our Spirit, Service, Green and Healthy, and our POP Patrol, which is like a safety patrol. This year, 55% of our 4th graders have chosen to be part of our student leadership team. We are very excited to watch their leadership grow this school year. To help address our emotion regulation goal, so that's through our PBIS goal, we are working to implement Balavistics with students. This is a research-based program that incorporates the use of exercises rooted in rhythm, which helps address students' visual tracking, impulsivity, balance, regulation, and anxiety issues. There is also partner work that is in these activities, which means that students need to cooperate and can also help use as peer teachers. You will see on the top right picture, there is a classroom doing Balavistics. This is a 3rd grade classroom. In the middle picture are teachers. We had 18 teachers from Prairie View participate in the Balavistics PD this summer, and we actually have the second session on Thursday. So we are very excited to be able to meet some of our students' regulation needs by using Balavistics.
All right, we start just like the other folks did. We start with our theory of action. And I have to give a big shout out to our leadership team because they've really, really worked to create what our identity is and what we stand for. And so this was similar to years past, but really massaged to look at the things we want to focus on. And so that was really a half a day's work getting it right to represent what we do and who we are. So you can see that there. And on the next slide, really just tried to hone in on 2 things that make us unique. One is really, really obvious, and using our learning spaces to create visible learning for our kids. We have so many opportunities, whether it's with our graphics, with our geothermal pumps, with our solar panels, with our garden. You see up in the upper right-hand corner a bike that they can pedal and power different things within the building. So we're trying to figure out what is the best way to be authentic in that learning. And I really would be really just a terrible principal if I didn't give a shout out to Kristen Dupuy and Pam Eilenfeld, Mariah Richards, and Velvet Holmes, who are creating grade band lessons that we can use as tours throughout our building so kids are stewards of their environment and understand what our building was made for and how it is a teaching tool within itself. One of the things, being along for the whole journey, whether it was from the design team forward, it was really thinking about creating our building as an experience for kids. And many of you have heard me say that I had this aha moment years ago that we are creating more of an experience like a museum almost for our kids. And so now we're creating the lessons to accompany that. So it's not just learning they see in the halls, it's learning that they do. And so that picture there is one of my favorites. That is like a whole class engaged in planting our gardens. And that was all designed from a 4th grade team in our first year. And that was their vision coming to life. So that's really exciting to see we're turning it into thoughtful, purposeful lessons. The other thing I wanted to highlight, and there we go, is we really struggled with how do we create our own identity. We had pockets of kids from each of our existing sites. We had kids that were new to us from other districts, and so we had an opportunity to do that. What confounded that whole situation, of course, was a pandemic, and it was just tricky to even get to know names of kids and to meet them when they were just in their learning environment. Now that we're in a situation where we can mix it up and move about and engage with kids, It's been really, really exciting. We looked at our panorama data and we knew that our kids in the first 2 years, hats off to Jess and PBIS, found that our kids didn't have a strong sense of belonging. Well, when you peel that onion apart, of course they didn't, because they had been Brooklyn Bobcats, they had been at Netherwood, they had been at Prairie View, and they were all bringing different experiences in to Forest Edge that we needed to really jump on and use some of those best things done at other sites to create experiences for kids. Some of my favorites, and I have a bunch here, some of my favorites are Lift Every Voice and Read, which was brought about from a first grade teacher, Heather Vitale, who had an experience in another district to feature readers from the Black community where they had books that they came in to read. And for me, it was super exciting to see former students be our guest readers, community members come in and engage with kids. Of course, we're going to continue that. We did some things that were a little bit easier to organize and plan, like grouping kids with reading buddies. We have big kid classes with little kid classes. We have interest days where kids can sign up for something they want to learn about, and it's mixed with other kids from other grades. So we're trying to find that now, after we've worked on creating that sense of belonging, the data did increase, but now we're looking at how can we also now engage our families and bring them along with that journey. You've heard the term street data. At our Ready, Set, Go conferences, we had teachers collecting street data and asking parents, what would be best? What do you want to do at school? What time of day would you like to do it? What kind of activities could we offer for you that would be engaging and to bring you along in our journey? Our PTO has supported a number of events. Our STEAM fair was a big success last year. But now we're looking at building one step further and doing some offerings that we are having families engage in active learning in our school. So look for those adventures because we'll be asking for all of you to come along for the ride. But again, our big goal right now is working to engage our families as our kids have really found their home at Forest Edge.
All right. Lastly, I'll be taking us home tonight. So we have our Rome Corners, our RCI theory of action up there. And just to give you a little bit of idea of what it looks like. So over the summer, about anywhere from 7 to 16 people walk into RCI. We're fresh. We're feeling good. About 6 hours later, we're disheveled. Everybody's sweating because we spent the last 6 hours engaging in looking at data, academic data, survey results from our parents, our students, and our community, really to highlight what we need to focus on. So when we were able to talk to our leadership team, we're going to focus on 2 areas tonight. It really isn't that ugly, but I just wanted to give you that visual. And so the first thing we wanted to talk about is how we elevate educators' expertise to center the pedagogy of voice by learning with and from each other. One thing RCI, and you're going to hear a lot of similar things, but one thing RCI is really proud of is that all of our staff members are engaging in professional learning communities. So we have teams just starting the process this year and teams who've been in the process for the past 2 to 3 years. So when we're in these learning communities, we're continually asking ourselves these questions. How do we learn how do we move our learning forward? What did we learn today and who benefited and who did not? And based on what we learn from each other, we really make intentional responsive plans right then and there that really go in and impact the learning of the students the next day. Also during this learning time, teachers are able to share their expertise and look to support each other. And in the month of October, we're going to have 10 to 15 RCI staff members participating in a collaborative classroom visit. And so, like that you heard before, a CCV is a time for teachers to go to visit other classrooms. And so we have a teacher opening the classroom for 4 other brand new teachers to come in and actually watch a lesson being taught. And we're really going to focus around why he did what he did and how we can learn from each other. So it's a huge lift for our staff to support each other to make this happen. And we talked a little bit about, I think we have 2 more clicks, okay? Just 2. So luckily we only have 2 more slides. But the next one we wanted to talk about is develop and foster intentional partnerships with learners, families, and communities while centering marginalized voices to honor their lived experience. And this is really where we're going to talk a little bit more about the students. So one way we do this at RCI, and I have to incorporate FES as well, is that we work with the Greater Madison Writing Project, and this is absolutely amazing. So the Greater Madison Writing Project answers a contemporary call for a respectful argument discourse. So units are based around inquiry questions that have multiple possible answers. We introduce the kids to a conversation that's already going on, like by sharing texts from diverse perspectives, and ultimately writing and asking the students to take a stand on what they feel and what they view on the issue. As we read the text, they go out and pull evidence to support what their learning is. It's an amazing learning activity for all of our students to engage in. Another avenue at RCI that we work for partnerships is student-led clubs. So we I have to thank Miss Katie Anderson for this one. We have clubs, a lot of them. So as students, if anybody hangs out with 5th and 6th graders, they have a lot of unique ideas and thoughts. Very awesome. And I'm not kidding, that it's really great. But so that some of their interests, we really don't have a class on capybaras. But so some of their interests, we just are not there yet. So Miss Anderson understood this need for our students to create these clubs. So last year we have over 30 student-generated clubs. So what they do is they come up with an idea and they invite anybody to join. They find a supervisor, which is an educator in our building, and the educator graciously donates their time to supervise this club during a lunch and a recess. And it's a really great experience for students to actually build connections with staff members and other students. And you can see, I think it's on the left-hand side, that's our kindness club from last year. And so they're great. They're coming back this year as 6th graders. One day I got a note in my mailbox. You looked a little rough yesterday, Miss Olander. I hope you have a better day at the kindness club. So I'm like, oh, it was just a board meeting the night before. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. And then earlier, I shared that every school has their own community time built in. But RCI, I really enjoy the way our staff does it. So we have a soft start every morning where our students go into their homeroom, and there's 2 staff members there. So there's someone that they might see for language arts, science, and social studies, or history, but then there's another staff member in that class that's just equally as important to build those connections and really teach the students what it means to build a community, have another trusted adult. We talk about, we're intentional about teaching empathy, skills for learning, emotional management, problem solving, and taking other students' perspectives. So RCI is really proud at the partnerships, and I think we've been shining and collaborating with students and staff alike. And that brings us to our, there used to be a thank you slide this afternoon, but so that's the end of our presentation. And I speak for all the administrators. We are lucky to serve our schools, our students, and our communities. So if you have any questions.
What I think we'll do is, since it's 9:17 and you guys have been working more than 13 hours today, I think it's important, though, that you guys have spent a lot of time and you get some feedback from us. So I'd just like to ask the board to go around maybe with something that was an aha to you, and then something that, you just want to make sure you give feedback to our principals about how amazing they are. So we'll go opposite this way. So Leslie, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. That's fine. Wow, first of all, wow. Thank you so much, all of you. Your leadership is amazing. And the aha moment, I guess, for me, and I'm trying to remember who said it, and I don't remember now, but one of you wonderful people said, our kids are making a difference in this world right now. And that, while yes, it's true, and you see it day by day, that was just like, my heart just like got 10 times bigger, and like, you guys are great. Thank you so much. And then the last thing I just want to say, and I'm sure my colleagues will echo it, but I love that you guys have all embraced what our community came together to do with Portrait of a Graduate, from the littlest kids, showing how how those values, all our values with the school district and what we want with our portrait of graduate, you guys are embracing that and showing how that can go across the board. And I just thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Leslie. Anna.
Wow. So I've got 5 pages of notes. Thank you for that. Seriously incredible. I'll echo that. One of the things I guess I'm interested in is the Courtyard Cafe open to the public? Because that sounds pretty amazing. As well as I think it's pretty awesome learning about the book club opportunity, and that book sounds really good, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. I think that sounds really intriguing. Like, I heard that, I'm like, I think I need to add this to my reading list. I just want to thank everybody for the incredible work that you are doing day in and day out, and the commitment you have to just really understanding our kids, not only their academic needs, but their emotional needs as well. It speaks volumes to hear all of the just amazing opportunities and the way you reflect on your students and your families and this community. It's so awesome. So thank you. That's all I got right now.
All right, Tim.
It's so interesting. I was watching you take all your notes. I literally jotted down 5 or 6 things. And one of the things I jotted down was how to talk so little kids will listen. That same book. I just thought that was, I had to write that down. As you all talked, what was so interesting to me is I kept thinking to myself, so who's learning from who here? And over and over and over again, because you're learning from each other. The kids are clearly learning from you, but I could clearly hear you're learning from the kids. It's very inspiring. The other thing that really stood out for me was, I can't remember who mentioned it. I think it was Anna who mentioned striving and thriving learners, and how that can span from 4K to the adult educators. We are all striving in some areas and thriving in others, and allowing each other to be vulnerable as a striving learner in certain areas, but then being so giving in those areas where you're thriving is, again, inspiring. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. I know it's hard not to get emotional when you hear this, isn't it? It's just so incredible. I can't remember who was the order here. Troy, I think.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lindsay, Dawn, Anna, Cindy, Carrie, Lindsay. We, as a board, very often, too often, hear about the great work that you do in a reactionary mode. And tonight, we got to hear about what you really do in a proactive mode. And you do it so well. So what a team. I mean, just an incredible team. And so the one thing that I'll just touch on that really stood out to me, that I think flows through every piece that you talked about tonight, is the tiered goals. And the goal of 100% of learners will show at least a year's growth as measured by our chosen benchmark assessments and or our IAP goals. I just think about how incredibly complex that is for you to deliver that to every single student. I mean, every single student is getting individualized learning, and my day job is pretty complex, but it is nowhere near the complexity that goes on in these schools. So that is so powerful, and thank you. Great presentation.
All right, Heather.
I'm not going to be nearly as eloquent as anybody else who has spoken before me, mostly because my mind is just blown away. I know that we've done this in the past. I think in my board tenure, it's been COVID-esque, so maybe not quite the same, but I honestly, the whole presentation, I was like, wow, 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 wow. The commitment and focus on academics and the way that you all use data, to analyze and to drive what you're doing. But then also, I think Krista said earlier, it was like, the head and the heart, and the way that you care for our kids exactly where they need you to be is just incredible. And it just speaks volumes to this whole child emphasis and the portrait of the graduate and how you carry that through and everything. It's awesome to hear about, the assessments and all the things that you do to manage, but also to know that those aren't the only things, and the way that you approach things, whether it's, the mindfulness piece or how, I can't remember who said what, again, mind blown. But, how when adults are growing, the kids are growing, to all of the clubs. And it's just, we're just so fortunate. And to have this time for you all to highlight it from our littlest learners on up through 6th grade is just really incredible. So thank you.
Mary.
So first, thank you very much for all that you do every day for our learners. It clearly has shown through your presentations. Obviously we want our students, we have our 5 core values, and we have the portrait of the graduate that has been developed. And to see your presentations in how you are addressing each of those is really impressive. I love the fact that you spoke not just to the curriculum but also to problem-solving strategies and emotional regulation. I mean, those things are so critical for everyone, every person, from the littlest to the oldest. Problem-solving strategies don't ever go away, and so learning them at a very young age suits everyone better for success in their life, regardless of what path. So just thank you very much.
For me, this was an excellent presentation. It really gave us a sense of, from a proficiency standpoint as a board, the things that we're responsible for in terms of our kids learning. And you really demonstrated what our kids are learning and how they're learning. The proficiency and the growth, I think it is so hugely important that as a district we understand the difference between the both and how they work together. I think the graphic that you guys presented, just in terms of where our learners are, they're at grade level, they're ahead of grade level, they're a little behind grade level. That's an equity piece, and that's a really good visual about recognizing, as Troy talked about, each learner and where each learner's at, and we have a plan for each learner, and we talk with them, and what do I need? And so we're engaging kids in their learning. I think some of the other things, you mentioned the heart and mind. Thank you guys for bringing your hearts to work. You really care about these kids, and that is so important. I mean, you can't ask people to do that. People have to bring that themselves. And so if parents are watching this or they're interacting with you, they really understand that you do that. You're really good at your jobs, but you also really care about their kids. And it's inexcusable for people to question our trust, the trust that parents place in us about their kids. That's inexcusable. That's not acceptable, because we show time and again how much we can be trusted with the care of our kids, and we're doing a damn good job. So thank you. The last thing I'll say is two things. We've talked a lot about bringing parents along, and I'm really happy that you all have really embraced that, and that was part of Portrait of a Graduate, is that we are teaching kids things that we never learned when we were in school. And somewhat our kids are ahead of ourselves in terms of emotional regulation or social emotional learning, or how kids are learning math these days, and you're really embedding the learning in interest activities, and that's something that parents can get. And so I really appreciate how you're bringing parents along. And then I think the last thing is your colleagues in 7 and 8 and 9-12 really owe you a debt of gratitude, because you're doing a lot of work that's going to benefit them later, and our kids are going to see it. And so that's really the neat thing that we'll see as board members, is all the work that you guys are doing right now from 4K to 6 is really going to benefit them later on. And so that's really going to be exciting to see. So thank you. You guys are amazing, and we really appreciate you being a part of our district and choosing to be here. So thank you. Dr. Bergstrom.
Don't worry, you guys can go sit down. You don't have to wait and listen to me.
But I just wanted to say I'm honored to work with each of them and to work with all of the people whose hard work they're representing tonight. And we'll move on. Just in just one moment when I get the clicker. We'll go to the superintendent's report. Because everything that you just saw really was the teaching and learning update, as well as the fact that it fits into the strategic planning that we've all been talking about. These are the school level goals and their action plans to achieve them. But before I get to our Prairie View update, I want to mention that today is Indigenous Peoples Day. And our students have been, I'll use the high school as an example. Our students prepared some information to go on Panther Vision regarding what a land acknowledgement was and the history of it and why it was important. Because at the PEP assembly on Friday, there was a land acknowledgement with the understanding that Indigenous Peoples Day was right around the corner. So I would like to read for you what was read at the PEP assembly so that you have an understanding of what a land acknowledgement, if you're not already familiar with it, what it is, and that it's meant to be a way to honor and uplift. Today we would like to take a brief moment to acknowledge that the high school occupies the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk Nation. In 1832, a treaty forced the Ho-Chunk Nation to leave their land, and despite many attempts of removal, they continuously persisted and returned to Wisconsin. The oral traditions of the tribe state that the Ho-Chunk originated in the Red Banks in Green Bay. Today we honor the inherent sovereignty and legacy of resilience and resistance of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Now, after that, I'll move on to another way that I want to, highlight some resilience. And that is really thanking our Prairie View staff, because our Prairie View staff has really had to be very resilient. So while we had a really wonderful and uplifting opportunity to bring the schools together for a day, Prairie View is now six classrooms remain at Netherwood, and everybody else is over in what was half of Prairie View, because the other half is still being cleaned. Drywall is being replaced. Things are happening at a really positive pace, but that means that we have a lot of students and staff that are still in makeshift rooms in Netherwood. Netherwood's been gracious and wonderful, but it's not home. Right? So it's still a little bit different for our teachers and our students who are there. And the people who have stayed are, if you don't have a whole classroom of students, you are doubling, tripling, quadrupling up with someone else in a different room. So it's been a challenge, and they've risen to the occasion. I think the students are continuing on, and they are mightily resilient. And it's really the adults that are trying to make sure that things go smoothly. And it's a big lift, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of them. Sorry, guys. I just did something. Okay, there we go. We had two of our golfers, Addie Sable and Drew Hoffer, played in the state tournament today. And then they both are able to, they had scores high enough to be able to play again tomorrow. So congratulations, Addie and Drew. We're really excited for them and can't wait to see how tomorrow turns out. And then later this week, I believe Thursday's the first day, we have Ella Piotr, who's going to the tennis state tournament. And if she wins Thursday, she has potential to play Friday and Saturday too. So congratulations to our athletes. And then this one's kind of fun. This was Miss Winterberg's class at Forest Edge, learning about pollination through their Power of Flowers science activity. So you can see that they're kind of excited about doing some of these experiments and working alongside one another and the adults. Oh, I hope a lot of you have tickets for Friday night when Rockapella is coming to the Performing Arts Center, and our students are
our own noteworthy a cappella group at the high school is going to be the opening act for Rockapella. So they have been practicing so that they can be the opening act on Friday night, and we're all very excited to see them. And homecoming. It was great. All the way from the little kids wearing favorite color day and their orange and black day, so you can see a lot of pictures here coming from the high school. Different grade levels featuring different colors or different themes on different days. It was just a lot of fun. And if you were at the parade, you saw that there were a lot of kids just having a lot of fun. And speaking of a lot of, the dance at the high school was almost 1,000 kids. Yeah, out of a class of or group of 1,200, almost 1,000 of them came to homecoming, and it was great. The kids were wonderful. So much jumping around and dancing, and it was just joyful to watch them have so much fun. And I think somebody had a black light and neon colors, and it was just fun. I also want to show you the picture in the top right-hand corner as you're looking. That's Mr. Mark, our head custodian at Netherwood, wearing his Be Kind t-shirt for Favorite Color Day. And he was working alongside a student who just really enjoys any time he gets to spend with Mr. Mark. So this is just another way to show that everybody in the schools plays a role in making sure kids feel like they belong and that they are part of something special. Here's some parade photos. And remember, it isn't just for the high school, it's the whole community. And I remember when I first came here, going on 20 years ago, my first homecoming parade here, I was absolutely blown away. I had never seen something where I felt like the whole village was lining the streets. That was so new to me. And it's something that I still get a kick out of every single fall. And that's it.
All right. I guess we are moving into closing. First is future agenda. We have a board meeting in a couple weeks, and we will have presentations from 7-8 and 9-12 as part of that, and then if we have anything else that comes from committee. All right, going to quick checkout before we head out for the evening. Mary, any checkout? Nothing for me. Heather? Troy? Anna? Nothing. Tim? Yes, I remember. Leslie? I'm good. Okay. I just wanted to piggyback on one thing that Dr. Bergstrom said. You know, a sign of, we know that kids are more successful in school if they have at least one connection. And so we started the year with 300 kids at OMS coming to Jumpstart. Is that correct? We now have had Netherwood back to school night where they had 600 people come through. We have 30 clubs at RCI, and now we had 930 tickets sold for the homecoming dance. So thank you guys. You're really reaching out, and our kids are really enjoying being back in person in the community that they're in. So thank you for all the work that you do. And I also want to thank Dawn for all you've been through with Prairie View. Thank you for being the leader of that school and your students. And Lindsay, thank you for welcoming them. And that's a big disruption. And so you guys have handled it beautifully, as well as Zane and Andy and all the staff. So we know that was an unexpected big thing, and you guys have done an amazing job. So just want to let you know we said thank you for that. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned at 9:37. Thanks, everybody.